I call to order the regular meeting of the Powhatan Board of Supervisors, November the 26th, 2018. Let the record show that all members of the board are here. Today is the anniversary of a day of Thanksgiving decreed by President George Washington in honor of the passage of the Constitution of the United States of America. Ted, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I ask that we take a moment to think about the people who make the operations of our government work. These folks, as Mr. Williams pointed out at a recent service recognition ceremony, are the ones that come to work every day to help us do the people's business. Those who balance our books, those who clean and maintain their buildings and grounds, those who word process their agendas, their resolutions, and their correspondence, those law enforcement agencies and first responders who protect us, those who teach our children, those who administer our financial systems and our IT systems, no matter how old they are, not the people, but the systems, those who research and seek out best practices for us to consider. The list goes on. I invite you all to recognize them for what they bring to bear for our community, day in and day out. Thank you. Are there requests to change anything on the agenda as it has been presented to us by the county administrator?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to remove item 9D, the resolution in support of Powhatan County as a Purple Heart County. I've been working on this with Bonnie and Mr. Tom Ashmore, who's a citizen of the county, who asked us to work on this. He would like to bring a few more people with him to the meeting, so we're going to, I'd like to move this to our December 17th meeting.
Is there a second to this motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any other changes to the agenda? Then I'll entertain a motion to formally approve the change. A second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. This is our first public comment period. It's one of two public comment periods. We welcome the civil sharing of your thoughts and your perspectives, your opinion. It is important to us that we hear from you, whatever your position is. Some guidelines. If you are here to speak on an issue listed under the public hearing section of the agenda, something specifically already arranged, we ask that you wait until that time. As a point of decorum, we ask that you use this period for 3 minutes or 5 if you represent a group, that you don't attack anybody, that you don't campaign, and you don't sell a product. Please consider not repeating, if possible, what you've already heard from someone else. The public comment period is open. Oh, one final thing before I open it. If you're here to speak on anything in section 9 of our agenda, that is our proclamations, our recommendations, or the ERA resolution, now is the time for you to speak. Public comment period is open. Mr. Carver, always good to see you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, and I should hit the 3-minute mark. If I go slightly over, I apologize, but I'll email my comments so you have them.
Can you have your name and address for the record, too?
Yes, sir. And thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Jim Carver. I live at 4245 Steger Creek Drive in Powhatan, 23139, District 5. Bottom line, I'm speaking this evening actually hoping to convince you to not consider at all your proposed Resolution 2018-49 in support of ratification of the ERA by the Virginia General Assembly. I'm not here to discuss the merit of that House joint resolution at all. I support my position with the following points. Point number 1, a review of previous Powhatan County legislative agenda priorities documents from 2014 to 2017 and previous agendas revealed to me no other instances where the county has decided to identify an item like the controversial ERA in a letter for consideration to our legislators at the state or in a resolution. Instead, the predominant trend in each year's letter is to identify the handful of items that the state legislation is undertaking that may affect the core business of the county with respect to traffic safety, funding, agricultural, broadband, unfunded mandates, public health, the Beaumont Juvenile Facility, etc. These are items that I would classify as reasonably and popularly supported by a majority of the county's residents and address core county interests, vice state and federal. It's possible that the board has considered separate resolutions in support of state initiatives. I'm not aware of any at this time. I may be incorrect, especially ones that are as divisive as the ERA. A good litmus test for whether the board should consider a resolution of this nature or is to ask ourselves, what possible items would the board be willing to support? Can I anticipate seeing a resolution from this board in support of Senate Bill number 48, which is on the 2019 legislative agenda? It addresses concealed handgun law. Furthermore, if our elected state or federal reps proposed a future bill that would change abortion guidelines, would the board be considering a resolution supporting or challenging? If our elected state or federal reps proposed a future bill that would introduce sanctuary guidelines, city, state, or federal, would the board be considering a resolution supporting or challenging that initiative? Obviously, the last two are hypothetical situations. But in my opinion, it's simply not county business and introduces rifts in our county unnecessarily. There's a reason we have government at the local, state, and federal level. One of the advantages, in my opinion, is it allows citizens to have representation and influence at their level on items, I'm nearly finished, that specifically impact their daily lives, schools, roads, public safety. I believe the board's focus lies in its charter, Board of Supervisors Vision 2030, and consideration to support state and federal initiatives like the ERA amendment is beyond that scope. This helps me segue to my next and final point. I would opine that each of you was elected by your constituents making reasonable assumptions that it was based on your proposed positions on local matters, not whether you supported a U.S. constitutional amendment. It's often been said in these meetings that constituents that elected each of you anticipate that you'll act in their collective best interests. And that is primarily true for traditional core county business and functions. But I would suspect that many citizens do not have the expectation that their Board of Supervisor member would be considering a resolution in favor of the NRA. In closing, I absolutely respect both sides of this ERA issue. I applaud the enthusiasm. It's what makes America great. Having been in many places where citizens don't have the right to vote, get stoned in the street, or speak out, I'm appreciative. But I believe the board considering a resolution supporting the ERA is a strategic error, unnecessarily divides the county, is beyond your primary scope and purpose, and most likely is not supported by many of your constituents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Carver. Anyone else wish to address the board?
My name is Sally Bays, 476 Bellbridge Circle, Midlothian. Mr. Chairman and members of the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors, you have already received 2 memoranda from me on this topic of the Equal Rights Amendment dated November 8th and November 19th. So I'm not going to repeat what I have said to you previously, but I would again ask that you hold the line against the current political agenda behind the ERA today. Stand with your colleagues in Prince William County who voted against this resolution just last week. Do not hand over Virginia's legislative power to the federal government and to unelected federal judges. Our own Powhatan County attorney very clearly expressed in his legal opinion shared last week that this resolution before you has no sound legal basis. Please represent your constituents in Powhatan by doing your part in stopping Virginia from becoming the 38th state to approve the ERA. I urge you to cast your vote for life by voting against this Equal Rights Amendment resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Lauren Ann Kennedy, 4553 Old Buckingham Road, Powhatan. Good evening, neighbors. I have to admit that I'm a little surprised we're still having a discussion about human rights after all of these decades, especially when it's almost 2019. So I started to do some research, what the ERA really is and isn't, and concerns of the opponents. But I believe in any discussion, one must understand a bit about each other. So here's a bit about me. I have a history in civil rights. My father, Cornelius Bryant Kennedy, was legal counsel for the Senate Minority Leader in 1964 and was asked to lead drafting legislation which the Senate and the House, bipartisan, could pass on civil rights. He did, and President Johnson signed it into law as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I have 2 daughters. One's 25 and one is 20. They are both amazing and headed into promising careers, with one going into medicine and one going into the legal profession. So the ERA. Interestingly, a man just asked me the other day, why do we need the ERA? What rights do I have that you don't? Well, let me tell you. When the Constitution was written, women had no rights. Even Justice Antonin Scalia said, quote, "Certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on basis of sex. The only issue is whether it prohibits it. It doesn't." And yes, there are amendments, but the courts historically apply the 14th Amendment to issues of race and religion and specify sex as discrimination is subject to the lower standard of intermediate scrutiny. If I move to another state, that state may have laws in place that allow even some measure of sexual discrimination. You don't have to worry about where you live. Were I a homemaker, my value would not be recognized by current attempts at equality. And even though my daughters and I are highly qualified, we will statistically earn 78 cents to every dollar that you earn. Many companies have equal rights statements. The government does not. Were I a government employee, I would not have the same rights as you. So I read your concerns about the ERA. It will destroy the family structure. In fact, it will not. It will do the exact opposite by recognizing that each person in the union has equal rights and recognition for what he or she contributes. It will encourage abortions. It will not. Decisions on abortion have been made based on privacy rights in the First, 9th, and 14th Amendments. It will require co-ed bathrooms. It will not. In fact, it specifically states that just spaces are not required to be co-ed. The federal government will meddle in states' rights. It will not. Both the government and states, all states, must bring their laws into compliance. It's going to be, I always get this one, apocalyptic. Thank you. It will not. Actually, given how many states have passed it, and in fact, over 130 countries have had similar measures, I think we will be okay. The laws currently on the books, all individually and collectively, fall short to protect a woman's rights as a human. I guess it comes down to why wouldn't we want a woman to have the same opportunities, rights, and treatments as anyone?
Please-
Not better, not
please-
worse.
Please begin to wrap it up.
I am.
Okay, thank
The
you.
other man went on, I got like 14 seconds. Not better, not worse, just the same. As Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, quote, "So I would like my granddaughters, when they pick up the Constitution, to see that notion that women and men are persons of equal stature. I'd like them to see that this is a basic principle of our society," end quote.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Joan Golden, and I reside at 1426 East Overlook Drive in Powhatan. I'd like to speak tonight in favor of the resolution supporting ratification of the ERA in Virginia. I will keep my remarks simple, as the amendment itself is. As a woman living in America today, I do feel like I have all the rights that I need. However, it has not been always that way in my life. And without this constitutional amendment, it will not always be that way. I see it as a guarantee, and I congratulate our Senator Sturtevant for the courage of taking up this, the fight, which at this point people should understand we will never give up. And I urge you to support the resolution tonight, and thank you for your courage in doing that.
Thank you, Ms. Golden.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Robin Kennedy. I reside at 4553 Old Buckingham Road in Powhatan. I'm here to speak on behalf of women in the military. I served in the Marine Corps as an engineer for nearly 12 years. I was one of the first females integrated into the engineering field when it was open to women in 1984. I didn't ask to be the first, I just wanted to be a Marine. I participated in Operation Desert Storm. I was also in the military police and a pistol range instructor. I continued to serve the Marine Corps and my fellow veterans in the American Legion and the Marine Corps League today. Early in my career, I found myself as the only female in the platoon of 90 male Marines. I was jeered, harassed, and ridiculed. My proverbial toolbox had to be heavier, and I had to carry it farther and faster than the men, just to simply reduce the amount of harassment that I endured. The standard there was indeed different for me. Expectations of my performance were two extremes, either far lowered because I was a girl, or unattainably high, just to try to prove that I didn't belong in their corps. One hot day in Okinawa, a Marine Master Sergeant whom I did not know took me behind a bulldozer and said with venom, "You don't belong in my Marine Corps. I'm gonna do everything in my power to see you kicked out." Was it because I couldn't do the work? No. It was just because I was a female, and he didn't like it. He didn't succeed. One myth about the ERA is that it will, quote, force women into combat by requiring women to register for the draft. Well, I submit that the draft ended in 1973. In Operation Desert Storm, 265,000 reservists were activated instead of a draft. 382 Americans died, and 15 of them were women. Since 9/11, nearly 1 million reservists have deployed instead of a draft. 6,821 Americans have died. 147 were women. My message is, we, women, are already there. We're flying fighter jets, leading infantry platoons, and we've met the high standards required for such roles, and we're doing them well. But we're still facing similar treatment as I did 35 years ago. But today there's no front line. A pilot can sit in Nevada and bomb a target in Afghanistan, when cyberspace is the real threat and our most dangerous battlefield. Anyone, regardless of sex, if they meet the high standards defined for any role, should have the right to fill that role. Equal means equal.
Wrap it up, please.
A woman's life is no more or no less valuable than a man's, and a man's life is no more valuable than a woman's. Despite the prejudice and attitudes of some here, of many like that Master Sergeant so long ago, equal means equal, regardless of sex, and should be guaranteed by the very Constitution that we continue to swear to support and defend. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Hi, my name is Easton Weber. I live in Powhatan, and I can't do this one. I'm sorry for your time.
She wrote this, so we're going to read it.
That's fine.
This is Easton Weber. She lives in Powhatan, and she is 11 years old. She's in 6th grade at the Powhatan Middle School. She has been very lucky to have parents and teachers who have always believed in her. They encourage her to get good grades in school, play hard in soccer and basketball, and more importantly, to always use good manners. What none of this has prepared her for is that when she leaves her parents' home, things will not be fully equal for her. I will give equal effort, but not have equal protection under the Constitution. You are probably looking at her right now and thinking, this girl doesn't know what she is talking about. If that is true, I, as her mother, I challenge that idea. She is a girl that knows that she will make 78 cents on the dollar, that her friends of color will get paid 63 cents, and one of her Latina friends will make 54 cents on the dollar. She looks forward to working hard to earn her pay, but she also expects to be paid fairly. All boys and girls should expect that. Equal pay is why she got involved with the ERA 2 years ago when she was 9 years old. We have the pictures and the history on that. Since then, she has met and talked with members of Congress, delegates, senators, and board of supervisors across all of Virginia. She has met 85-year-old men who want full legal protection for their great-grandchildren, and she has spent time with old ladies who were beaten in the streets in the 1960s because they supported the Equal Rights Amendment. This is a reminder to her that the ERA has been around way too long and it needs to be ratified. She says that she is not sure what she wants to be when she grows up, but that she does know that when someone asks her where she is from, she wants to proudly say, I am from Powhatan, Virginia, a county and state that 100% supported all of me. Please consider supporting my full and equal future by passing this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weber.
Hi, I'm Alicia Amos, 2966 Janet Lane. I'm here to ask for you to vote in favor of the resolution in support of Virginia's ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. This is not a partisan issue for me. This is not a liberal or a conservative issue. This is a desire for basic civil rights for all, regardless of gender. This is not just for me, but for my daughter and all the other little girls in our community. I do not want her or any of them to struggle against gender discrimination. It is past time that women were included in the Constitution. Legislation that protects women can currently be easily struck down because there is no constitutional protection. Gender discrimination cases are treated more leniently by the courts because gender isn't protected like race or national origin. Women's civil rights are and should be protected. Women's rights are civil rights and should be protected as such. I respectfully ask you to pass this resolution, thus signaling to the rest of Virginia that Powhatan values equality. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Sean McGuire. I represent the Family Foundation this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I do come today to speak in opposition to the resolution before you, in addition to the comments made earlier. Supporters here today are determined to make Virginia the 38th state to approve the ERA. However, the Equal Rights Amendment as drafted and proposed is a moot issue. It failed in 1982 to reach the necessary states for ratification to the U.S. Constitution. The ERA is a moot point. The Attorney General of Virginia actually in 1994 made that clear when he stated that it has failed both the time period set when it was initially passed by Congress and again the extension of the time period. Having failed both deadlines, it is no longer a valid resolution. 4 states have rescinded their ratification, and it's not possible for Virginia to ratify now. As you consider the resolution before you still, it is essential you know that the ERA adds nothing to the U.S. Constitution that is not already secured by the Constitution or federal and state laws. Both women and men have a full claim to equal rights under the Constitution, clearly stated forth in the 5th and the 14th Amendments, which the U.S. Supreme Court applied in United States v. Virginia to women. It does not just apply to race and national origin, it applies to women as well. Sex is a protected class. There is a different level of scrutiny, but that's not designed to allow discrimination by state or business actors. It is designed to have a lesser scrutiny so that those programs and separate bathrooms and different issues, insurance sales policies that treat women and men differently can be maintained. Statistical differences between men and women exist. And if the ERA is passed, No one will be legally allowed under the Constitution to make decisions based on those statistical distinctions. While on its face the ERA sounds appealing that women and men are equal, the reality is we are already there. Women are already there in every position they qualify for to serve and to lead this country. Women are already in these positions, and the law already protects them in those positions. Anyone who is paying a woman 78 cents on the dollar is in violation of federal and state law currently. We need to enforce the law. That is not legally permitted. The ERA will not actually add any new protections. We already have those protections in place. They simply need to be enforced. With the ERA, it is designed to protect, its stated goal is designed to protect women. However, there is nothing that the Constitution or the government or this board can do to prevent people from being cruel, from being discriminatory, or being rude. We have laws in place that already can punish those who behave in such a manner. The ERA will add nothing to those protections already in place. So please vote against this resolution today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire.
Hello, my name is Leslie Baskin-Asip. I live at 3673 Old Buckingham Road. I would like to counter some of the points that the gentleman just said. The ERA is not already, the rights for women, it's not already housed in the Constitution. The only right that is housed in the Constitution and guaranteed for women is the right to vote. There is nothing in the Constitution that maintains that women are equal as men unless the government decides that it's going to enforce it that way. But if it's not in the Constitution, there is no mandate for it to be carried out locally in local government, at the state level, or even at the federal level. Therefore, we need a constitutional amendment in order to make it law of the land that will be guaranteed that women will have equal rights with men. Now, this equal rights amendment doesn't just benefit women, it will benefit men as well, because even though women vastly outnumber the number of people being discriminated against sexually, there are men who are also discriminated against sexually. As to this being a moot point legally, there is some question as to that. There are legal scholars who have studied this. When you look and read the Article 5 of the Constitution, there is nothing that says that there should be a time limit on a proposed constitutional amendment. It only states how many people in Congress need to approve of it being passed out of Congress and 3/4 of the state to vote to ratify it. There have been subsequent court cases that have reinterpreted the province of the Congress in terms of proposing amendments, but some of those are Dillon versus Gloss, and then Coleman versus Miller, and they indicated that Congress had a right to limit the number, to put a time limit in the resolution, in the amendment proposal, but then subsequently, there was the passage of what they call the Madison Amendment, which had been proposed in 1789 and was not ratified until 1992 by 3/4 of the state. That indicated that if there is no verbiage in the constitutional amendment itself, there is no time limit to be imposed. The only way that you could say that this is moot is if the wording in the actual amendment that was voted on for ratification indicated there was a time limit. There is no wording to that effect in the Equal Rights Amendment. It is in the proposal clause. It is not in the actual amendment itself. Therefore, when the states voted to ratify the amendment, they were only voting on the exact wording of the amendment, which states equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. I rest my time here. I don't have much more time, but I thank you for your time to hear my case.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Waycaster, and I live at 1530 Greenberry Road. And I am here to urge you to pass a resolution supporting Virginia's ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. For years, Virginia has been on the wrong side of history. With regard to women's rights, Virginia did not ratify the 19th Amendment, providing women with the right to vote until 1952. It had been the law of the land and in our Constitution for a full 32 years before Virginia's legislators ratified this amendment. Virginia was also late to ratify the 24th Amendment, which declared an end to poll taxes. Virginia led massive resistance and in some parts of the state chose to close school districts rather than integrate children's classrooms. Virginia was on the sad side of history in Loving versus Virginia, where our state had outlawed interracial marriages. In 1967, Virginia's law was struck down by the Supreme Court in a unanimous decision. Virginia also spent millions of dollars to keep women out of VMI, a state-funded school. It was only as recently as 1997 that all Virginians were finally eligible to attend any state-funded school in Virginia. It is time we step out of the shadow of our past. Some state will be the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, and Virginia has the historical opportunity to be that state and be on the right side of history this time around. Tonight, our county and our Board of Supervisors has the opportunity to affirm our values. It is the right thing to do, and it is beyond time to add the Equal Rights Amendment to our founding document. As we said just a few minutes ago in the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castle.
Mr. Chairman, you have a time certain.
Yeah, I know.
Good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt. Our agenda calls for a time certain thing to happen at 6:30, so I'm going to have to ask you to wait because we've got a promise to people who are here for other issues to start at 6:30. So may I ask you to have a seat, and we'll call you back when we start again. If you look at our agenda, we have literally a 6:30 time certain item that we must do, and I apologize.
And 6:15.
We're moving to item 9A, if you're following along in our agenda.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Tucker, would we, one question, please? Would we not, those were time certain items, 6:15, or time certain items at 6:30 are our public hearings. You know, the purpose of this time certain for those sitting in the audience was the citizenry used to come and sit for hours and hours waiting for their public hearing. So we put a time certain agenda together. We don't normally have, as I guess, unfortunately, we don't normally have as many public comments as we've had tonight, which is a good thing in my eyes. So maybe eventually we need to look at the agenda to change it around. But are we going to do our proclamations, or are we going to move on to this time certain public hearings?
Or you can by motion and vote, amend your agenda and change the timing if you want to do that.
What's the pleasure of the board? Shall we continue with the public hearing?
With the public comment?
Public comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
like Mr. Milton said, the original purpose of it was so that people who are time certain don't have to sit through lengthy debate like the night we were debating apartments or whatnot. So this is the very reason we put it in the agenda. So I don't think it'll take too long to give these awards, et cetera, out, correct?
Are there any objection to moving to item 12, which is, I think, what you're proposing?
Did you want to?
We actually have 6:15. I should have brought it to your attention earlier. You've got the proclamation, first responder proclamation, the fire and rescue award winners. I mean, we have several items under 9.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I would move that we go ahead and allow the people to speak that are here for the ERA amendment And then at the conclusion of that, then we can switch to the time certain for the public hearings. But I think we should at least finish letting people speak for the ERA amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Williams. And one of the items under 9 is tab E, and if you're going to allow that to take place, tab E is to support and ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. So we're going to allow those time certain items to be heard before the public hearing. People would not have had an opportunity to speak. So I'm with Mr. Williams. Let them finish. Maybe we can ask the show of hands on the number of people that want to continue to speak on the ERA.
If you're here and you haven't already spoken, would you raise your hand if you're here to speak on the ERA, pro or con? In that case, I think I'll accept Mr. Williams' recommendation that we continue. The lady who came down, who I dismissed, I'd like to invite her back up. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. My name's Mary Jo Sheehy. I live at 2217 Lakeview Drive in Powhatan. I'll cut my speech down in order to progress the time. People have already said some of the things I was going to say, but I want you to know that I stand in support of this amendment passed in a bipartisan manner in both houses of Congress in 1972. I ask you to support this resolution tonight. The General Assembly last year came close to ratifying the ERA, but the GOP-led Assembly rejected it, a House committee refused to take it up, a Senate panel defeated it by a 9-5 vote. This will change. Progress is taking place. Women across America are finding their voices, getting involved, and getting elected. This is progress. Progress will always move forward. Only one more state needs to ratify the ERA. Let's be the one to make that history. Let's make history again. It's time for Virginia and Powhatan to show that we stand for equality under the law. I agree with Senator Glenn Sturtevant of Midlothian, who supports the ERA. He states, quote, "We are the birthplace of the Bill of Rights, but we need to continue to make sure that we include this fundamental American value, which is equality of everyone before the law in the United States Constitution. We need the ERA. We are not protected under the 14th Amendment." Ruth Bader Ginsburg and 94% of recently polled Americans agree that the ERA is needed. So should the people of Virginia and Powhatan. Ruth Bader Ginsburg stated, "I would like my granddaughters, when they pick up the Constitution, to see that notion that women and men are persons of equal stature. I'd like them to see that it is a basic principle of our society." Me too.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name's Lisa McNerney. I live at 3924 Fighting Creek Drive. I'm here to oppose, or ask you to oppose ratification of ERA. I hope you will concur with the Prince William County that this is really not the business, the Prince William County Board of Supervisors, that this really is not the business of the county. And I'm going to keep this pretty short and simple. I do not want my tax dollars being used to fund abortions. And a little bit of history, I'll let you know, Eva Scott, who I have known through the years, was one of the first female legislators in this state of Virginia. And she fought vehemently for years throughout her tenure to oppose the ERA. So again, I ask that you oppose this and do not want my tax dollars being used to fund abortions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNerney. Anyone else wish to address the board? There were more hands than that.
Good evening. My name is Frances Broadus Crutchfield. I live at 1196 Huguenot Trail. It's a Midlothian address, but it's in Powhatan County. I marched in favor of women's rights in the 1960s. It is horrifying to be in my 70s and still fighting the same battle. I hope you will forgive me for indulging in humor on behalf of this important cause. Nothing else has worked. As an aging actress, I've become very intimate with the character of the Wicked Witch. She wrote this for me. I found it on my nightstand this morning, written in green ink. Dear white male persons, yes, I mean you and you and you. The Constitution calls you that too. Women's rights are long overdue. Women are human beings too. Not just for having babies for you, or serving your favorite Brunswick stew, or removing their clothes to improve your view, or giving the sex you feel is your due. Human rights are not only for a few. God created women too. Under law, they should be equal to you. Please support the resolution, do. Or maybe they'll serve you witch's brew and make laws to control your bodies too.
Thank you, Ms. Crutchfield. Ma'am, you're out of order.
Please, you're out of order.
Hi, my name is Rachel Ega, and I live at 2715 Pilkington Road in Powhatan, Virginia. There were a lot of things that I wanted to say tonight about the reasons that I greatly support the Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution. But I wanted to give you a little heart story, which is that the other day I was at Food Lion with my 7-year-old son. And last year he was part of a history group because I homeschool 3 of my children. So I support life, I support people, I support equal rights for everyone. And so the children took a history class. They got to hear the history of the Equal Rights Amendment. And then they got to go to the General Assembly and talk to delegates, talk to senators, talk to people that are on the ground doing the public policy work and really understand how they do their work, where they do the work, and that we can go and talk to them and talk to them about what our needs are. And our needs as women and sons are to have equal rights in the Constitution. And so he studied it, he made stickers, he handed out stickers to different people within the General Assembly building, so much so that he wanted to hear the entire history. So we walked him through the entire history of the Equal Rights Amendment. He could not understand why his sisters do not have equal rights under the law in the Constitution. And especially when I explained to him that 2 Supreme Court justices have said equal rights are not currently afforded under the law to women in the Constitution. So back to my heart story. So we were in Food Lion, and I was wearing my ERA pins, which have become sort of my bling to wear around everywhere. And he wears it too. And the cashier, who was male at Food Lion, asked him what ERA was. And he said he'd been seeing some pins. What is ERA? And my son said, you do not know what the Equal Rights Amendment is? You do not understand that women deserve equal rights in the Constitution? Do you know that I have 2 sisters that are not afforded rights within the Constitution? And he was very good at explaining it to the cashier. And the cashier said, you know what, I'm going to go home and I'm going to read about it, but it sounds like you have a very good case for your sisters to have equal rights within the Constitution. So I present to you today that while some have said that this is not the job of all of you wonderful people to consider, I think we do need to be on the right side of history here. In Powhatan, the county that my son lives in, my 2 daughters live in, to support equal rights in the Constitution through Virginia. And if it was that divisive, 37 out of the 50 states wouldn't have already ratified. And I don't know why we're looking at one board of supervisors as we should follow that board of supervisors. There have been other board of supervisors to have approved support of the Equal Rights Amendment. So I present to you today a heart story. I want you to go home, consider looking at the history of the Equal Rights Amendment. Also, it was presented today, and consider that you want equal rights in the Constitution for everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Harris, good to see you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Abel Harris. I live at 2303 Three Bridge Road, Powhatan, Virginia. I've been a resident of Powhatan County for 73 years. I've endured the equal rights all of my life. And I can truly encourage every one of you to vote to support this ERA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'm getting ready to close the public comment period. If you have anything to say, now is your time. Ms. Weber, good to see you again.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Weber. I live at 3554 Richards Run. And I spent probably 4 days writing something, writing it, erasing it, writing it, erasing it. I have been involved with the ERA for the last 2 years, and I'm actually involved because of my daughter. I did not drag my daughter into this. She led me to this place. And so when I was thinking about all of the reasons why the ERA is important to me and my family, and really important to me as a citizen of Powhatan, I had to come back to this community that we live in and how special it is. And I do believe that something like the Equal Rights Amendment for our community to pass a resolution to support Virginia to take this to be the 38th state is right to be done in this county. It's a county that supports each other. It's a county that shows up when your car is broken down on the side of the road. It's a county that you see all your same people at Food Lion, and you know where your aisle is and where you're going to do your grocery shopping. But most importantly, it's a county that's made up of half of women, and it's made up of half of men. And this is not about just for women. This is about gender equality in a whole. I have 2 daughters. I'm going to admit to my youngest that I always wanted a son. I was not so lucky, cut the factory off at 2. And I always wanted a son because I wanted to be able to feed a teenage boy. So I never got that chance, but I do have 2 daughters, and what I want for them is nothing different than I would want for my son. It is nothing different than I want for my friend's son, than I want for my nephew. It's just equality under the law. If we had full equality, if we were held, our cases were held to the highest scrutiny of the land, we would not be here talking. If there was not an issue, we would not be here. We would not be marching and having bus trips and asking people to sign petitions. And so that's why we are here. You may pass it. I hope you do. If you don't, we're going to keep going. There are 16 counties, especially red conservative counties, very similar to Powhatan, that have already passed this resolution. We are not asking for anything extraordinary. We are just asking for the county to say that I recognize that Powhatan will support Virginia to be the 38th state to ratify. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Weber.
Hi, my name's Katie Hornung, and I'm actually the campaign coordinator for VA Ratify ERA, and my husband and I have a house off Academy Road. And I am just here as a 4th-generation Republican to remind Republicans that this was originally a Republican carry. I sit in a lot of very liberal spaces with my liberal women friends, and this is one of them. But my family has, for a very long time, been very staunch equality supporters. My father came out to speak with Mr. Nordvig when Mr. Nordvig was hoping to speak with Senator Sturtevant. And my entire family, for many generations, I grew up in a ratified state. I didn't realize that Virginia wasn't a ratified state. And it was only when my 9-year-old, at the time, she's now 13, said, "Mom, Thomas Jefferson didn't even mean all men when he said all men are created equal, and we know he didn't mean women. Have they fixed that yet?" And she's really asking about, have we fixed it in our fundamental documents? Not, can I be a teacher? Can I be a principal? Can I be a legislator? She's not asking about that. She's asking, have we as a country fixed our fundamental underlying bedrock documents? The ones that we all say we care the most about, the one with all the amendments that we say freedom of speech, right to bear arms, all of the amendments that we hold dear, especially as conservatives. The family that I grew up in, Constitution was it. And, you know, right next to the Bible. Those were the 2 documents that we all needed to know very, very well in my family. So I'm just here on behalf of, I guess, we call it a nonpartisan campaign, because whether somebody is Green Party, whether somebody's Libertarian, equality is for everyone, and all of us should be working for equality. So I would just like to point out that Page County has passed, their Board of Supervisors has passed a resolution. Shenandoah County, their Republican board, has passed a resolution. One of their longtime Board of Supervisors had actually rode with us on the ERA bus tour, which was really fun and exciting to have a nice bipartisan moment in that bus. Not just that we have some bipartisan advocates working on it, but that we actually have bipartisan legislators coming to the table. This Friday, I'm on a panel with Senator Stewart, who's a Republican in the Fredericksburg area. Republicans are coming to the table on this. We need that to be more. We can't have one party stake out equality and the other party stake out non-equality. That doesn't work for Virginia, and it doesn't work for America. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to address the board on any issue? Seeing no one come forward, I close this first of our 2 public comment periods. I'm going to move to item 9 and do A, B, and C, but not E, and then we'll move to item 12. I'd like to let these folks who are going to be recognized tonight be recognized so that they can go home. So our first item of business is a proclamation.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I hate to interrupt. I'm a little confused, and I'm thinking maybe some of them are. Did you mean to close the comment period just for the ERA speakers that you had raise their hands? Because there might be people.
No, I asked if anybody wanted to speak on anything.
Right. But before it was just for ERA, and then we were going to move into time certain. I'm just trying to clear that up, that's all.
Yes.
Okay.
Was there anyone here that wished to speak as a public comment period on any other item other than the ERA? This is to your point.
Okay.
Chief, sorry about that. That's okay. Come forward, then I'll reopen the public comment period. Tom?
Mr. Williams's motion was strictly to leave it open for the ERA part.
Right.
So you need another.
So can we do the time certain and then come back to these good people that would like to continue?
Leave this
or-
open was what Mr. Williams, I believe, suggested.
We left the public comment period open just for the ERA, so we should be coming back, according to the agenda we approved, to the time certain.
The orders of the day, which is
Correct.
Robert's rules, would say we go back to the time certain, but
Right.
leave the public comment period open, and once we're finished with the items under the time certain, you can reopen the public comment, or you can all agree to continue the public comment period, whichever you prefer.
I'd like to propose that we could allow the people who are here for a public comment period on other things to go ahead and speak.
No problem with that. Just wanted to
Not
clear it
enough?
up.
Yeah, as long as they're,
Mr.
as long as
Chairman,
everybody's-
just please remind them if it's on a public hearing, item 12, that you can speak at that time and not, you don't need to speak at this time. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
Sir, identify yourself.
Dominic Seminara, 5770 Moore Creek Road in Powhatan.
Thank you.
I'd like to address item 12C, the Apex Towers. I want to speak in.
Sir, we're going to have a public hearing on that item. You should wait until that is
Okay,
on the
I wasn't-
agenda.
That's fine.
Okay,
Whatever
thank you.
works for you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, our rules actually preclude discussing that in public comment because it's on a public hearing.
Anyone else wish to address the board on any issue? On what?
RC. RC is in the public hearing.
No, we have a special public hearing for that, sir, later. Anyone else wish to address the board on anything that's not on the agenda otherwise? All right, in that case, let's move to item 9A, a proclamation P 2018-19 First Responder Appreciation. Chief Singer?
Thank you, Chairman, Board of Supervisors, County Administrator. Any first responders in the room, if you could rise? I know we had some of the dispatchers come, some of the firefighters came, hopefully. This is a proclamation for first responder appreciation for our performance during Tropical Storm Michael. Whereas every day the citizens of our county rely on the dedicated professionalism of our first responders to preserve the peace and secure the safety and well-being of all who live and visit Powhatan. And whereas the effects of Tropical Storm Michael occurred across the Commonwealth on Thursday, October 11th through Friday, October 12th, which generated a large number of calls for service, both non-emergent and emergent. And whereas individuals, both career and volunteer, from 911 dispatchers, law enforcement, fire, emergency medical service, utility providers, the Virginia Department of Transportation, and other organizations in the public safety sector came together as first responders to protect and aid the public in their time of need. And whereas no greater courage is demonstrated than that of the individual who puts his or her life in jeopardy to perform acts and administer care on behalf of others in need. And whereas they do their job well and without fanfare, which makes it easy for us to forget the dangers involved and their dedication to the community. And we ought not take them for granted. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County does hereby acknowledge and praise all of our first responders for a job well done in keeping our county and citizens safe.
I'll make that in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those, any comments from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Williams?
I think I speak for the whole board. We realize what you guys did for us back when we had the storm. If you go around this county, you can hardly see a road that wasn't affected somewhere where you can see where the tree was going across the road and had to be bucked so that you could get around the county. So y'all did an outstanding job during that period of time. And again, I know I speak for all the guys on the board. We appreciate what you did.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. I know it's you folks back there who do this work. Thank you very
Our
much.
dispatchers,
Yes.
first to the first responders, yes.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you again. Moving on to item 9B. Chief, would you handle this one too for us?
I can. I'd like to call up Joe Spoza, our recruitment and retention coordinator, and Jamie Timberlake. Is Jamie here? Yes, he's here. I'd just like to announce to you that the county has won a national award for our recruitment and retention efforts for fire department and first responders. And I also have Mr. Scott Kane, he's back there, who's one of the partner organizations, the Volunteer Fire Insurance Services, who's part of the people who helped present the award to us down in Florida last month. But I really want to thank Joe for all of his work that he's done, and of course Jamie with the Jets is another part of the big recruitment and retention efforts that we have going on. So Mr. Kane, you have anything?
Welcome, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for the invite and the hospitality. I'll just take a quick moment if I could here. This is a pretty significant award. First off, I'm Scott Kane with VFIS out of York, Pennsylvania, and we are Volunteer Firemen's Insurance Services, and of course, Powhatan County is one of our big clients. So this is a pretty exciting award for us to see it come home to a client this year, somebody that's in my backyard. Just a couple of the highlights for those that aren't aware. Recruitment and retention is a pretty big deal in the volunteer fire service right now. It is an industry that is rapidly declining. A lot of counties are taking on the necessary resources to fund these with paid personnel and whatnot. So here in Powhatan County, in July 1st of 2017, you initiated a program that used a multi-pronged recruitment initiative over social media, radio networks, whatnot. The program tries to engage and get the applicant involved in observing and doing ride-alongs within the county as soon as possible to gain their interest. In the first year of the program here in Powhatan County, you had 91 applicants that applied. You currently have 73 of those applicants still active. 51 of them are firefighter applicants, 69.86%, and 17 of those are certified as IDLH, Firefighter 2 capable. That's pretty outstanding numbers for your first year. The program has also bolstered your junior emergency technician, better known as the JET program. You have over 30 active members now in the JET program. That targets boys and girls ages 12 to 16 to learn about and train in the emergency services industry. That is our future. It is a feeder program into the regular junior membership program, which starts at age 16. You have also expanded your junior program into a year-long curriculum of firefighter 1 and 2 within your high school. Again, that's just not heard of. The JET program meets monthly, moving from station to station. Active members instruct the juniors and provide close structured hands-on activities such as hose operations, forcible entry, search and rescue, and first aid. Several parents have joined as senior members just to partake in these activities with their kids. So that's something to be honored, that's something to be proud about. Chief, job well done, your team. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Bravo, we'd like to
Thank
have,
you.
like to have a photograph before you move away for the newspaper.
I'll take a picture for Laura tonight since she's not here.
One, Joe? Come on.
It's a school night.
I want that
Yeah.
hat.
That's your future.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did we make a motion? I'll make a motion that we accept this resolution. A second, please.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Chief, thank you very much for what you do, and thank all the people that supported you. Thank you for coming all the way down from Pennsylvania, sir. We appreciate it very much. Moving on to item 9C, I'm going to turn over the chairmanship of the meeting to Angie Campbell, and I'm going to make this reading recognizing our electoral board and our electoral officials. Karen, would you come down? And Ms. Weber, who's a member of the electoral board. And Ms. Swimba, thank you for coming. This is a recognition of the Powhatan County election officials, whereas the 2018 Virginia midterm elections held on November the 6th were the busiest in recent history and extremely important in the Commonwealth government, and whereas 15,021 of the 21,625 registered voters in Powhatan cast their ballots, equating to a 69.5%, a significantly high turnout for a midterm election. And whereas under the leadership and guidance of Karen Alexander, the registrar, Jamie Swimba, the deputy registrar, members of the Powhatan County Board of Elections, Cecil Jordan, Josephine Goodman, and Andrea Weber, and numerous poll workers, the election went smoothly, and Powhatan received almost no negative feedback from voters about the process. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors hereby expresses its sincere appreciation of Mrs. Alexander, Mrs. Swimba, and all election officials for their dedication and attention to the details of the voting process. Mr. Chairman, I make this a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Would you like a picture? You want to take a picture? Okay, come on.
Can you get us from there?
Yes, sir. Okay. 1, 2, 3. One more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Yes. Is the resolution down there? Is the other resolution down there?
No, we're not going to do that one.
Just please let them know when we're going to do it so they know. Can we let them know when we're going to do that one so they got in a feel?
We're going to do the resolution for the ERA after we've done the time certain issue items on number 12, because I think there's going to be some time spent discussing it, and I'd like to get on with the time certain issues because so many people need to go home if there are no objections. So 12A, our first time sensitive issue, is a resolution 2018-50, amending the fiscal year. Mr. County Attorney, Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Finance Director, Charla Schubert, will give you a quick rundown on that, and then this is a public hearing.
Resolution R 2018-50, amending the fiscal year 19 budget is in the amount of $10,215,000 for the 5-year capital improvement plan and other capital improvement program. As in the Code of Virginia, if you amend your budget more than 1%, we are required to do a public hearing. The CIP that we're proposing for appropriation was published in the Powhatan Today on November the 14th as well as on November the 21st. And if you have any questions.
Are there any questions from Charlotte before we open the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just make the point, this is an appropriation amendment of the current fiscal year with just the current fiscal year appropriation. It's not actually adoption of the CIP. So I just want to make that
Mr.
clarification.
Williams, was
No,
that what?
the county administrator made the correction.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Then I'll entertain a motion.
It's a public hearing, Mr.
Oh, no.
Chairman.
I now open the public hearing on this issue. If you wish to speak to it, come forward, give us your name and address, please. Seeing no one come forward, I close the public hearing. Now I entertain a motion.
Well, I'd like to be able to ask some questions if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
The things that we are moving over are from the bond issuance we did for the capital projects, which was $9.1 million, and another $973 from the general fund. Is that correct, Charlotte?
Well, we're moving $1,078,000 from the general fund. It's just $973 will go into capital improvements, and $105 goes into the utilities capital improvements.
Okay, well, I've got a question about some of the projects. You know, for example, I see $35,000 for a recreation plan. Now,
Yes, sir.
remember when we created the Recreational Advisory Committee, one of the reasons that we did that, we felt like we had the resources, you know, within the county to be able to create that plan through the members of the advisory committee. So my question is, why the $35,000? Because originally it was going to be a $60,000 plan, and we said, no, we've got people in the county that we're comfortable with, that we know that can do that job for us.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take the answer there. And certainly, Ramona can get up and speak. But I think that I would just clarify that while we do believe that we have very knowledgeable citizens who can provide an insight into our recreational needs and provide input into such a plan, the actual data collection efforts and the costing and those sorts of technical elements of a plan wouldn't necessarily be within the skill set of these individuals on the committee. So I don't know that we actually anticipated that the committee would be the folks we would look to do the particular work, as much as be folks who could guide a contractor through the process and vet the contractor's work as representatives of the community.
So are we talking about actual blueprints for what the plan would look like in terms of the physical facilities? Or are we talking about looking at what are the recreational needs as a whole in the county and being able to project forward what type of land we need to accommodate whatever number of people by sport that's needed?
The latter. We would not be looking for blueprints at this phase. This would be getting a handle on the volume of needs for different types of recreational uses in the community, numbers of kids in baseball, numbers of adults in basketball,
Yep.
square footage of fields needed, or that sort of thing.
Because I know, you know, we've got the numbers today about the usage. I know we've got and can get about, you know, the unmet need that exists today. I mean, checking with the different associations and looking at the field usage, it seems like to me that the Recreational Advisory Committee, working with staff, should be able to come up with numbers.
I could certainly allow our Public Works Director to talk in more detail. I know that she reached out to some sister localities for information about what they did to develop their plans.
Ms. Carter?
Yeah, the $35,000 that's in that budget is actually for the data collection. It's for this company to create the survey, send the survey out, and collect all the data. So it's the people on the advisory commission, while they're very knowledgeable, they all have full-time jobs, so they don't have the time to dedicate to the data collection. So once they create the survey, send it out, and gather the information back, they will present that information to the advisory commission who will then disseminate all that information and decide what the priorities are.
But didn't the last survey cost us, what, 23,000?
The citizens?
You know, we did a survey here in the county. remember, just
citizen
recently.
survey.
Citizen survey. So are you proposing another survey of that type to address recreational needs?
Correct.
It wouldn't be 35,000.
Well, the 35,000 was a number that we got from a consultant, and that's just based on, they're just taking high-level
All right,
estimates.
I'm not going to take up any more time tonight, but I would ask, because I know we've got several engineers that are serving on the Recreational Advisory Committee. I'd like for you, again, to go back and consult with them, consult with staff, you know, to quantify the need, for the survey, as opposed to going to the different, recreational associations that we have today that can probably give us some information about, what their usage is and what more they're looking for because they can't get the fields that they need, et cetera.
We did actually bring this information to the advisory commission, and they went through all the information from the consultants, and then they made the recommendation.
So it's their fault.
Mr. Williams, are you
Thank you.
suggesting that we will take $35,000 out of this resolution?
I'm trying to quantify the need for it.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to do. So if you've already gone through the Recreational Advisory Committee and they're saying that we need to do this survey, all I'm asking, I'm just raising the question is, just make sure that we're good stewards of the, taxpayers' dollars, in this effort. That's what I'm looking for.
And Mr. Melton, do you have anything on this issue before we go back to that? I think you have got more items to ask
Yes, I
questions
got
about.
just a couple
Do you want to
more.
speak to this issue, Mr. Melton?
Charles, I have one question. The expenditures that we have listed here, were they the same expenditures we had in all our workshops as we worked on this over the last several months?
Yes, sir.
So none of these have changed? It's not new for us to see? We've seen these before?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, you have other items.
I do. I looked at the advertisement, and the advertisement appears to be different from what, we're actually doing, because I see things like renovation of the administration building. Is that on there, on the transfer into the budget?
Pocahontas and Powhatan Elementary School EPC, $2.9 million.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm talking about, if you look in the public notice on page 79, it says renovation of administration building, $95,000.
We rolled some of the, a few projects that were considered facility improvements and just on the actual appropriation, put them in facility improvements, but then have the projects broken out like we do with a lot of the other facility improvements. It's just for ease of accounting. But those projects, once they're started, will be broken out, and those are the amounts that will be
All right, so-
put to those projects.
So the $95,000 would include the receptionist desk out front in the administration building?
The principal goal of that project is to renovate the public restrooms.
Correct.
No, but
The
when I checked
administrative
on this
desk.
today, they also included the
It
the
does.
receptionist desk.
It does exist in the project description, yes, sir.
So are we proposing to do that, where we do a different bill date, where you come in the county administration building, there'll be somebody there to direct you to the right office?
So I don't think that we finalized that, Mr. Williams. The board initially was interested in the concept of a single, point of contact for our customers. It was then subsequently eliminated from the budget. But I think that the question of whether we pay somebody to be the customer service contact in the building is, while related, not the same issue as whether we have a focal point for folks coming into the administration building. I can't tell you how many times citizens walk into the building and they stop. As soon as they come in the door, they look left, they look right, and they don't know what to do because the building was not designed to welcome guests and point them in any kind of correct direction. But I'm certainly sensitive to the fact that the board has elected not to fund a paid position to sit at that desk. It might be a good position for a volunteer, it might be a good position for an intern, it might be a good position for a consolidated paid or part-time person. I can't answer that question, but I would invite us to think about the possibility that while we're renovating, the major project being the bathrooms, which are original to the building, that it might be a good time to look at some other minor adjustments such as this one in the event that we do at some point feel like we ought to have a better customer experience coming in the building. But funding something like that has not been approved. A position for that has not been
Well,
approved.
the position improved, but I don't want to go up to the county administration building one day and see the build-out occurring where we're putting in a reception desk where now people, as you say, are standing and looking whether they're either going to go left or right, depending on whether they're going to go to the planning department or whether they're going to one of the other offices that are delineated on the signs with arrows. So what I'm interested in, are we going to be doing that desk out front and spending that money as part of the, what did I say, 95,000? That's why, you know, whether or not we got a position at this point, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking, is that going to be part of the renovation?
I'd like to take a look at it and see if it can be accommodated within the budget. I don't know that it can be.
Well, I think then the issue for us, if you're going to be looking at it and potentially doing this, is that something that the board wants to consider? When we put the money in the budget, that's the checkbook. Then that's when it can be spent, correct? Once this goes in the budget, it's not going to be called back to us in terms of whether or not we're going to do that receptionist desk or not.
If the board would like to give me specific direction to not do the reception desk without coming back to the board with details of the plans for the building, I'd be certainly happy to do that.
Do we have any idea of the 95,000, how much this piece of it is? The bathroom, the two bathrooms are the greatest hunk of the 95,000.
Yes.
I think what Mr. Williams is after is what piece of the 95,000 is this desk or this work site, whatever it's going to be called? Do we have a feel for it?
We probably do have a feel for it, but it's always subject to, you know, how the bids come out. Ms. Carter, do you recall the general range of that? Was that that was around somewhere between 10,000 and 14,000, something like that. So it might be actually a better price if worked into a larger project, which is why I'd like to maybe think about putting that as a bid alternate to see if we can get that done for
But
less.
For tonight's action, we've either got to pass it as presented or pass it minus 14,000. That's assuming David doesn't have anything else.
I would disagree, Mr. Chairman. I think that you could just simply say, you know, approve it, but say, before you build such a desk, you need to come back to the board. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Is that acceptable to the board? Mr. Williams?
That's what I'm looking for.
Other comments on this issue?
Because along with the desk is going to be coming in a position, whether it's volunteer or a paid position, so one follows the other.
Any other question on this item?
No, just a comment. I supported it when the county administrator had it in the budget before, because I have been in that county administration building numerous times when people do walk in the building, they're confused, and they want to know where to go. And I think it will speak volumes to have somebody there, whether it's a volunteer or a part-time person, to be able to guide people to where they need to go, because it's intimidating enough, so, anyway.
Well, I've had just the opposite experience. I've gone up there and couldn't even find somebody to ask a question. It was basically, the building's been empty. We're not Chesterfield. We're certainly not Henrico. And the building, again, if you go in there, there's not too many directions you can go. You can either go left or you can go right. You got signs that point you to the departments, and departments are, you know, have labels on the door. So that's not my experience, but I'm going to go to the next thing. Ramona, this is for you. Utilities rate study, 25,000. What is that?
That is to evaluate the rates that we have right now. We're going to go with a consultant to evaluate the rates that we have and make sure that they're comparable and based on our land use and development. And
Why do we need a consultant, I guess, to compare our rates to other localities? We pretty much do that already.
well, we're kind of going with the expert in the field. So they'll evaluate our connection fees, our capacity charges based on the infrastructure and our debt service, and
We can't do that in-house?
I don't have the expertise to do that.
What about
Not
Johnny?
at that level.
What about Johnny?
No, we don't have the expertise to
Nobody can
do
do
that, and the time to dedicate to it either.
I might add this thought to the conversation, if I may, in that if we are to move forward with the acquisition of any other utilities in the county, there is been a suggestion that to equalize rates, we may need to do some cost shifting, and that's a little bit more complicated mathematical equation to assign certain operational costs and certain fixed costs and try to equalize rates, if you will, from one set of rates to, and merge it with the county rate. So it probably would be wise to have somebody who's an expert in rate making to be involved in that.
And we did have a rate study for the current rates that we use, but it hasn't been updated for many years, and we're proposing to use the same consultant.
Who was that, Dewberry?
Draper.
Okay.
Any other questions on this issue?
Mr.
Are you
Chairman.
finished with this one?
I'm
Larry?
finished with this,
That
but
one.
I want to come back to something related to this.
Okay, fine.
Mine's
Larry?
mine's for Ramona. Hey, thanks for staying up there, Ramona. Is this tied to our request to come up with options related to, at the workshop, when we talked about how some customers have water rates and they have water testing, and the testing is actually more expensive than their actual water bill? Is this going to, I know it's not directly, bad pun, flowing out of that, but I would like to know if this will help determine our options. In other words, will these new utility rates that they're suggesting help fix that problem?
No, that's a separate, that's the strong waste
Okay.
program, which is completely separate from our rates.
Strong waste meaning the grease traps and all that sort of thing?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other issues on this item? Mr. Williams?
Just
Next.
a related issue. When we voted at the workshop the other evening to pass the capital improvement plan, I went home that night and I said, well, we probably should have had a public hearing on that. So that led to a series of discussions with Ted and with Tom. And so Tom, I had a conversation with him this morning. Did we pass a CIP when we did it the way we did it back, at the last workshop? And so Tom, as I shared with you today, please share with us what you were able to find.
Yeah. Did some research today on CIPs at Mr. Williams' request. The law is actually not a whole lot out there on CIPs. They're not mandatory. What the state law says is any locality may include in its budget a capital improvement plan. So state law allows us to include a CIP as part of our budget process. We're not required to do so. State law also allows us to ask the Planning Commission to prepare a CIP. Our ordinance Planning Commission enabling legislation actually does indicate that the Planning Commission should create a CIP. But again, all of that technically and legally would be tied to the budgeting process, which we didn't do it in the budgeting process. So we have a document called a CIP, but we didn't actually make it part of our budget because we didn't actually specifically, when we were going through the budgeting, include it as part of the budgeting process.
And so what?
So the CIP that we have is not technically legally part of our budget. It's a document we've adopted. If you want to call it adopted. I mean, it's an in-house document, but it isn't a CIP per state code because state code makes it part of the budgeting process. So it's not a binding CIP in the sense that, I mean, we didn't have a public hearing on it, weren't required to have a public hearing on it. Didn't make it part of our budget, aren't required to make it part of our budget. But I did want everybody to understand it's not in the legal state law definition of a CIP. It's not a legal state law definition of a.
So we got two issues before us, Do we want to have, quote, the legal, CIP per the Code of Virginia going forward? And secondly, what do we want the Planning Commission to do? Because, we've basically in our ordinance have told the world that the capital improvement plan comes from them. So what I would like to do is to come away tonight with a path forward of how we address those two issues. If we do want to have a CIP that meets the bar for the Code of Virginia, we should be doing what the other localities that Tom looked up, and I know Chesterfield, for example, when they do their public notice, they notice for the budget, and then they do the CIP underneath. So both documents are there for you to see. And it makes sense. When you stop and think about it, here's what you plan to spend, here's your 5-year plan for infrastructure, and you can see the relationship between the two. Now, the reason we're having confusion here tonight in terms of what we're doing with or without the CIP, with amending our budget, which is required with a public hearing because we're amending it by more than 1%, you know, what we need to do is to rectify this so that we don't have the confusion that we're having this year. And what my proposal is going to be that our fiscal policies and ordinances stipulate that we do the capital improvement plan during budget season and advertise so that people can see the relationship between the 5-year plan for infrastructure and what we're proposing to do with our current budget that year. It just makes sense. It's something we should do. So that's going to be my proposal for that we go ahead and change our fiscal policies and ordinances to do that. The second thing is, what is it that we want the Planning Commission to do? Now, we've done different things over the year, going back to my being on the Planning Commission with 2 colleagues that are up here on stage tonight, back 2004. We've done it differently. The first year when I came on the Planning Commission, we just held a public hearing. We didn't do anything, just held a public hearing. Then it's morphed that we could make changes, and then we made changes, and then we got to conformity with, the projects are in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So I know the Planning Commission is frustrated. What is it that we want them to do? Because currently, right now, we're saying that it comes from them, and that's not happening.
Tom, is that required that we have, that state law requires it to go to the Planning Commission?
No, what state law says is they can, on their own initiative, create a CIP, and at the direction of governing body shall. So the Planning Commission can theoretically create a CIP if they wanted to. They're not obligated to unless the Board of Supervisors tells them they shall do one.
So David, take the things that you want to get cleaned up one by one, and let's see if we can get clarity on it.
Okay, I think the biggest one is we want a CIP that's in conformity with what Tom has shared with us, with, the Code of Virginia. That is passing a CIP, having a public hearing in conjunction with the budgetary process. Is that correct, Tom?
Well, that's what the state defines as a CIP. Again, it says that the state definition of a CIP is a capital improvement plan that's part of your budget. That's the state definition of a CIP.
So how do we make this crisply clear going forward that we want that to happen? What I think you're asking about. Do we need to pass an ordinance or what?
No, I don't think so. I think we've been doing this a certain way as long as I've been here. I think all we do is just say, if we want to do it a different way, then the board just in consensus says, starting with this next budget cycle, coming up very soon here, that with this next budget cycle, we include the CIP process in the budget cycle. I think.
So can we just have consensus tonight that that's the way it's going to be going forward, or do we need to take some concrete action?
No, I think if you all nod your head, that's what you want. I believe the county administrator is
Nod your heads.
going to do it that way.
So, no, not negative.
I'm fine. I'm fine. We have not, as Tom said, we have not done that.
Okay.
I think in the 6 years, but we can do that, and that's
Okay.
fine.
The second question is, do we need to do anything to correct what is now for this year? Or are you comfortable that we're okay? Do you want us to make a motion to approve the CIP as presented so it's clean in the books?
Let me say this. I think because we didn't hold the public hearing because it was bundled in the workshop meeting, I think it would be good to just go ahead and fix it in place, have the public hearing, so the people are informed. That's the whole reason, we do these public hearings, is to inform the people. So if we want to go ahead and drive a stake in the ground and go ahead and do a public hearing and bless what we know is already the capital improvement plan, albeit it's not the official capital improvement plan as delineated by the Code of Virginia, I think there's benefit in doing that to inform the public.
Can we put this on the December the 13th agenda, get it out of the way, and fix
We
it?
can't do a public hearing then. Have to be our 17th meeting.
You got to advertise.
You can't do a public hearing in a workshop. Your next meeting is the 17th. So if you're going to make a public hearing, it needs to be on the 17th.
You
That's
got to give the proper notice.
All right, so let's do it on the 17th.
Okay.
I'm just looking for concrete
Yeah,
answers to the
I know you
questions.
are. I'm just.
Okay. Now, is there another question on the table we need to get an
The
answer to?
other, the other question is, right now, we say, because the Code of Virginia gives us the latitude to direct the Planning Commission to come forward with a capital improvement plan. Now, I know the Planning Commission hasn't been happy with the process because there's been differences in the way this has been done over time. So what I would like to do is to get feedback from the Planning Commission as to what it is that they see as their role and what is useful to them in their planning for the county, and then come back to us, and then we can make a decision on what type of ordinance change we might want to consider.
So can we put that on the Planning Commission's next agenda, have that discussion, and get some ideas from them?
Please.
That satisfy, and then they can bring it to us?
Please.
Thank you. Mr. Norvik, you had something, I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, a couple of things I want to clarify for the people sitting out here that our capital improvement plan, in case you don't know what it is, we're talking large projects. If we're going to build a school, if we're doing some major HVAC work, if we're buying a fleet of school buses, if we're building recreational fields, the big projects generally fall under the CIP. So that's what we're discussing. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to weigh in and make the point. I think everybody's got agreement on this. It's a good idea to couple the CIP to the budget.
Yes.
Whether we want to do it officially by Virginia code, which more and more localities are doing. Whether we do that or not this year, so be it. But it's still a good idea to couple the CIP to the budget directly. And I would argue to work on them concurrently. And if we're signing a budget the first week of May, I don't see why we couldn't sign a CIP sometime during May or definitely by the end of June. Because I kind of jotted this down. The CIP and the budget together are a plan. You don't spend it till you appropriate the money, but it's a plan. Planning should drive spending. Spending should not drive planning. If you're running your household budget and you're letting your spending drive your planning, you're in big trouble. Like, oh, I'm going to just buy that Lamborghini. I'm going to just put all my Christmas presents on Visa and American Express, and I'll pay it off some year. That's not a plan. That's not a budget. So what we're talking about up here is tightening this up so that we include the big projects with the rest of the budget, and we create a plan out of which will come our spending instead of the other way around. I think that's a good way to do business. So I wouldn't even mind seeing this in written policy as a guide. This would not be a resolution, but a board policy as a guide for future boards, and so that citizens can look and see how we handle money. Thank you.
Mr. County Administrator and Charlotte, could we ask you to put that together for our consideration at the meeting in January?
Are you interested in having that as an adopted board financial policy? Is that the question,
I
Mr. Chair?
think the answer to that is yes.
We could certainly do that.
Any objections?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Williams?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Melton?
So I'm going to make a motion. I think we beat this thing to death. I am just a little alarmed that we come to the meetings, we have workshops to have dialogue with our county administrator and staff on the proposed projects, and to come tonight and have to roll their sleeves up in that detail is alarming to me, but that's each person's preferences. I'm going to make a motion, we approve Resolution R 2018-50.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any final questions or comments?
Well, let me respond to Mr. Melton. I'm never alarmed when anybody asks good questions, and I don't care when they're asked, as long as they're asked. You know, the job we have is to get it right. So anytime we have that opportunity, I'm going to seize it.
Hey,
Secondly, Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to be voting for this tonight because as you know, I did not vote or was in favor of going out and borrowing the $9.1 million. So, thank you.
Okay. I want a recorded vote on this. Okay. So I want a recorded vote on this. We have a motion and a second to approve.
No.
I also was against the items in the bond package, so I'm voting no.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to item 12B. Before we have the discussion, I'm going to move that we defer this item for up to, but not to exceed 90 days. And on December the 13th, I'm calling a meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Work Team, Mr. Williams, Mr. Melton, and Ms. Carmack, and the following individuals, all other members of the Board of Supervisors, of course, the County Administrator, and Michael Barr, Jim Carver, Christy Elliott, Andrew Pompey, Michael Potter, Robert Royal, and Chris Schust. Of course, the meeting will be on the 13th, a public meeting, so anybody can attend that meeting. But I want these people to sit in a room and discuss with the work team that worked for 90 days on making recommendations on the comp plan, which included recommendations on RC. Having said that, is there anything else that needs to be said about 12B before we have a public hearing on it? Because we've advertised that there's a public hearing, I want to go ahead and have the public hearing. Anything else that needs to be said?
Does staff need to make their presentation, then open the public hearing? I think many people in the audience have already heard most of it at the planning commission level, but there may be new people out there, so maybe Andrew can give us the abridged version.
Yes, I think you're right. My list that I read off, I missed two names, I apologize. Pete Burris and Cabell Metz. Mr. Pompey, your presentation?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before Andrew starts, the list, I'm not sure of where everybody stands on that list. I know there's some developers on there. There's some significant landowners along 60. I know a few of them from discussion with me, they are in favor or not in favor of changing the RC zoning. I just want to make sure that we leave an opening for the possibility of, let's say, 2 more people to be joining that. I have no names right now to give you. I have no suggestions, but I want to make sure there's all the voices in the room. There's some people along 60 that very much don't want this to happen, and there's some that very much do want the down zoning to occur for tax purposes and whatnot. So
I'll agree to that, and I'll adjust my motion to that effect.
if we just have a little flexibility to invite people if we sense that there's a little imbalance of opinion in the room, that's all.
And it is a public hearing, so anybody else can come too.
And they get, but they get their 3 minutes. You're talking more about a sit-down,
Right.
like workshop environment,
Yes,
right?
indeed,
Okay.
indeed.
So if we could just leave a couple openings, I would appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Pompey?
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. So this case number 18-09-AZ, is a request by Powhatan County to remove the residential commercial RC zoning district from the zoning ordinance by eliminating several sections of the county code, sections 83-360 through 83-364. If this request is approved, that zoning district, the RC zoning district, would no longer exist. So properties that are currently zoned RC would have to be rezoned to another zoning district. Under the proposed scenario that's in the packet tonight, properties with a commercial use that are located outside of a platted subdivision will be rezoned to Commerce Center, CC, which is a commercial-oriented village growth area district. Properties that are vacant or used for residential or institutional uses and are located outside of a subdivision will be rezoned to agricultural 10, A10, which most of the county is zoned to. Properties that are vacant or used for residential or institutional uses and are located within a subdivision will be going to the zoning district of the majority of the remainder of the subdivision. There are a few larger properties that have been partially developed and have multiple zoning districts, and their specific zoning scenarios listed in the ordinance. In total, this proposal impacts about 500 properties, which are either zoned entirely RC or partially RC. How did this come about? On June 25th, the Board of Supervisors appointed the Comprehensive Plan Work Group to update both the comprehensive plan and come forward with a proposal on how to address this RC issue. We've heard from citizens in different public meetings that there's concerns regarding the form and functionality of commercial development along the US Route 60 corridor in particular. So that's why this work group was charged with looking at the RC zoning. For the past year, the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors has been discussing different tools that could be used to better manage commercial development along the US Route 60 corridor. Most properties zoned RC are located along that corridor, since in the 1980s, the Board of Supervisors created the RC zoning district and applied it to a 500-foot strip that extends 12 miles on either side of Route 60 from the US Route 522 intersection to the Chesterfield County line. The Department of Community Development recommends approval of this request since it would eliminate a transition-based district, aligning with language established in Section 83-340 of the zoning ordinance. It would help the zoning map better align with recommendations made in the 2010 Long Range Comprehensive Plan. It would reduce the number of split zone parcels countywide, aligning with policies set forth in the zoning ordinance, in particular Section 83-105. And it would help Powhatan County better manage growth and development, particularly along the US Route 60 corridor. On November 7th, 2018, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this request. 17 members of the public spoke, 16 expressed opposition to the proposal, and 1 speaker expressed support. After this discussion, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this request with a vote of 3-1, with the 5th member abstaining.
Any questions of staff?
Not at this time.
You ready for public hearing?
Public comment, yes.
I'm going to open a public hearing on this item. If you wish to speak to it, come forward and identify yourself. Mr. Butcher, good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Carson. Rick Butcher, I reside at 1803 Cook Road in the Ballsville area, District 5. When I retired from Chesterfield, I took part of my retirement and I bought a parcel, used it for a down payment on a parcel on Route 60. It's on the south side of Route 60 in between Red Lane and a half a mile from the Flat Rock business area. This piece that I bought because it was zoned RC, and I felt like it had commercial potential. This piece of property adjoins a piece of commercial property on the east. There are 3 small tracts to the west, and then we adjoin the business district there at Red Lane, where there's the professional building, there's Dinwiddie's convenience store, and a used car lot. So I think the broad brush approach of looking at this rezoning from a perspective of looking at a map is really doesn't give you an accurate picture. To look at what is zoned around it and what adjoins it, certainly agricultural is not the, A10 in particular, is not the zoning that it ought to be. Few months ago, we limited by right uses of RC, and so that was a restriction. There's also a financial restriction by highway entrances, because that's cost prohibitive to many small businesses. As well as there's no water or sewer there. So I think we have controls in place to check commercial growth already. I live in an Ag 10 district, and I know what Ag 10 looks like, and this parcel on Route 60 does not look like Ag 10 to me. We talk about split zoning. Split zoning is just an issue of an administrative correction. Some large parcels should be split zoned, but some small ones, this piece right here has probably maybe about 1/4 of an acre or less that is split zone. Certainly, that's just an administrative change. What I ask is that, you know, if RC is done away with, that we take an individual approach to those property owners that are interested in having some input on what their rezoning is, and meet with those individuals and allow them to have some input into what zoning their property gets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. Mr. Harris?
Abel Harris, 2303 Three Bridge Road. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Norris, thank you for that suggestion of 2 open appointments to that committee I'd like to be served on that committee. That Robert Royal and Pete Burris that you just named.
Come to the meeting on December the 13th.
Yes, sir. I would like to be added to that list.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And I think, sir, you've been very patient. You want to speak now?
I think he
No,
wants to
it's
speak on
in
the cell tower.
Oh.
Good evening to the board and to the chairman. My name is Jim Lewis. I live at 3599 Huguenot Trail, Powhatan. I'm representing some owners of 4 parcels that are at 3070 Anderson Highway and 3100 Anderson Highway. They bought these parcels back in 2002. Is same reason. It was selling for prime RC zoning right there on 60. It's about 22 acres. Some of it is A10 as it is now. But to down zone this whole thing without this person and without us having a say in what we want for what we have invested in since 2002 is just not right. We've been paying taxes on it since 2002 as RC. And that's like buying a diamond and then later on find out that you just bought a cubic zirconium. I'm well before 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sorensen, representing Midlothian Family Dentistry. We purchased 2 acres on Midlothian a little over 10 years ago with the specific purpose of adding to our business in Powhatan. We bought it with water and sewer, paid prime dollar for it. We are located on Midlothian, right there, and also in front of the elementary school and right down from the high school, which is perfect for a dental office. For you that don't know anything about medical or dental, we need water and sewer. We can't use well and septic and things like that. So we paid prime dollar for it. We have plans for development, and you're about to pull that all out from under us for that. So I think that's not a very good thing to do. I see that the broad brush approach is not the way to do this. The land we have, I've been in Powhatan for quite a long period of time. I have 10 acres off of Schroeder Road, and with a farm with horses and everything else like that. I know what is agriculture. I know what is commercial. You're not going to grow corn. You're not going to raise cattle on the piece of land that I have. Not very long, you're not going to.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to address the board?
I appreciate y'all letting me come up here. I'm Buck Tillman. I live at 4500 Old Buckingham Road. I don't know much about law. Don't pretend to. Don't really want to know to as long as I can obey the law. But I wonder, blanket zoning, is that totally legal? I don't understand it. I know in this situation, if it's legal, it's not good for me. And I'm not trying to be up here, I, me, and my, but I'm not on Route 60. And I bought 30 acres of land right there at Macon, 609, and Route 13. I've had auctions, after I quit teaching, I went into the auction business and I started having them up there. I went to the county and I told them what I was doing. They said, we know. They said, you're okay, we think, under agricultural. I said, well, I'm not selling livestock. They said, it's an old law on the books that you can have auctions under agricultural land. But if you're seriously going to do this for a business, and I said, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to sell antique vehicles, an array of things. And they said, we suggest you zone it commercial. So I said, all right, I want to zone 10 acres of the 30 commercial. I said, I also want to live there. They told me, rezone it RC. I did that. I paid the fees. I hired a surveyor. I had someone represent me at the county. I went to the public hearing in front of the planning commission. They approved it, sent it to the board of supervisors, passed it the first time. I've continued to stay up there doing my little thing, which is a little bit different. I don't know if you've ever been up there, but we've had a lot of different events up there. We've had county people up there. We've had school kids up there. We've had a movie production people up there. I said this stuff all the other night. I won't go through it again. So then I bought Nichols Store. It took out an acre, right in the curve. And that was zoned commercial. I got with VDOT and the county. I said it's the most dangerous place in this county. I chipped in with VDOT. We moved the store back, got it off the road, made the place a little bit safer. When I rezoned the 10 acres, I profit 50 feet all the way across. It's a long road frontage up there. I profit 50 feet. So then I tore down this old log building I wanted to live in, rebuilt it on the property, decided I wanted to add on to it. Well, it was too close to Nichols Store. This was RC, Nichols was C. Went to the county, says, how can I, add a room onto this thing? Rezone Nichols Store RC, you can redo the line. Paid $1,100 for the application, $300 I think for the acre. Got someone to help me, went through, no problem. That's how the place stands now.
Continue.
And I wouldn't want to waste a minute, but 3 minutes to do something like this is just not good. I mean, I've worked up there. I bought the place in '84, bought the store in '92, worked up there, done some different things. And anyway, I hope this thing doesn't go through. I think each property owner, if they inherited it, whether they bought it, whatever reason they have it, they should have the choice to keep it as it is, or if they want to downzone it, that's fine. I paid the county between $75,000 and $100,000 taxes to have the property up there, which is fine. No one in this place loves Powhatan any more than I do, except for being in the military and away at school. I've been here all my life. It's been 12 pretty good years in here, maybe a little more. But I appreciate your time. I think the people the other night asked if you would at least defer this thing and study it more. The 16 or 17 people, the one person was for it. They didn't say anything about it, but I think this thing got passed on to you all too quickly. I think there needs to be more studies, and I think some individual rights need to be looked at. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.
Anyone else wish to address the board on this issue?
Good evening. Excuse me, Adam Mormon. I represent Walton Development. Address is 8000 West Park Drive, McLean, Virginia. We have a 74-acre piece of property in the eastern side of Route 60 corridor. And a little bit more about me. I'm a landscape architect and I'm a land planner. That's my background. I've been doing it for almost 20 years, and I've worked on projects across the East Coast. And I come from a small town with a single traffic light in front of my dad's restaurant. So I understand making sure the rural integrity is understood and enhanced and appreciated. So it's very important to me that you understand that, and part of my background. I do manage about 26 other projects from Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina. So I would appreciate an invite to that committee and workshop if that's so welcome to me. I think I can offer a lot of insight onto some opportunities and ideas for the county. I do want you to reconsider the proposed rezoning of our property. Our property is currently zoned RC on the front piece. It's about 7% of our property. We've got some general commercial, and we've got some RR5. We don't have any A10, so we would appreciate reconsideration to rezoning it to commercial on that piece. And what we do want to do is make sure you're all aware that we do want to work with the county and all the stakeholders. When I work on a project, it becomes mine. It's a project that I take to heart and design it in a way that I'd be proud to live there, and that's how I work about my projects. And it is talking through with the existing citizens and planning staff and all community leaders. So we do look forward to having that opportunity to talk with everybody and finding out what the true needs of the site are and what the county would like to see there. But we do want you to take a little bit more time to go through and make sure that the zoning makes complete sense and it properly aligns with the existing comp plan, or I guess maybe the proposed comp plan. Just make sure that these things are on the same track and they're taking the right points from each other and not trying to get ahead of one or the other. There's a lot of things that a comp plan can do and a lot of things that it can't do. I've seen too many times the comp plan takes away economic opportunities when that was not the intention. So I'd hope, again, that we can align the zoning a little bit better and make sure that property rights are an important thing, especially usually in rural counties, property rights are pretty important. So we hope to be a part of those conversations, and I'll be here for the entirety of the meeting. So if anyone would like to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to anybody in the crowd or any of you fine folks on the stage tonight. Thank you very much.
See you on December 13th, sir.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else to wish to address the board?
Well, I guess y'all know who I am now. I'm Christy Elliott. I'm in 3471 Anderson Highway, which is Plainview or Perception Motor Works. I want to thank the board very much, all of you, for listening to me. I know I have complained and complained and complained, but it got me put on that committee, and I thank you for that. And I also appreciate the fact that y'all are considering deferring this further for at least 90 days, and I think that's what everybody's asking for right now. And part of the reason I think that I got appointed to the committee is I did give a list of recommendations were exactly what all of you said. Give us a choice. Let us see if we can work with that first. So thank you very much for that. And I'm here to do what I can for everybody, including myself, but everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Anyone else? For those of you who haven't signed in, I wish you at the end of the meeting or sometime come back and sign so we've got a record.
Good evening. My name is David Anderson, live at 2120 Stave Mill Estates Drive in District 2. Been a resident of the county for about 34 years. I own multiple pieces of property along Route 60 in the eastern and central part of the county, and I'm here to voice my strong objections to the proposed action. I was notified of this action, or what the county was proposing to do, about a month ago through a planning commission letter. Many of the comments that you have heard tonight were the same comments that I heard on that same night during the planning commission meeting. I found those comments to be thoughtful, compelling, and heartfelt. And after hearing those citizens speak, I was shocked that the commission did not discuss or debate a single comment. And then I had an aha moment as one of the commissioners, as they voted yes to eliminate the RC zoning classification, said he was voting that way because the majority of the county residents wanted this proposal to happen. And just then I realized that no matter how thoughtful, no matter how compelling, no matter how heartfelt the argument against this proposal by those most impacted, the landowners who have RC zoning, We will always, always be the minority on this issue. It's only a few hundred of us. So whose duty is it to protect the minority? Whose duty is it to protect our property rights, our investments, our voices? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's you on the stage tonight. As you deliberate, I trust you will listen to us, you will respect us, and you will protect us. In conclusion, I feel that the planning staff and planning commission's objectives are well intended. However, I firmly believe that this massive, one-sided, one-size-fits-all action is not the most effective and fair way to go about it. In essence, I believe that this rezoning action is the easy thing for the county to do. In one fell swoop, the county can force hundreds and hundreds of individual properties to immediately align with the county's new plans. I'm asking you to do the right thing, not the easy thing, by voting no or deferring this action. There has got to be a better way to meet the county's needs and the real-world practical needs of its citizens. I thank you for your time tonight. I thank you for your service, and I thank you for your thoughtful consideration on this matter.
See you on December the 13th, sir. Thank you.
I'll be there.
Anyone else wish to address the board?
Hello, my name's Major Hillard. I live in Chesterfield. We own 14 acres on Route 60 with 6 different separate land parcels. Disagree with this downzoning. If passed, who is going to pay for our market value loss? Who's going to pay for our loss? Somehow, back in August, our commercial uses were taken away from us without proper notice. Got no notice of this. Regardless whether C, A, whatever, what happened to our uses of our property? We used to have 87 uses, now we have 27 commercial uses. Give us back our land uses, please.
Thank you, Ms. Hillard. Anyone else?
How you doing? Chip Palmer, 3312 Anderson Highway. I'm probably maybe the only person in here that lives there, and it's my grandparents' place I own. It's been here, we've had it for 70 years. And I love the fact of having a lower tax rate, because it's killing me for someone that wants to live somewhere. I have no plans to ever make it commercial or do anything with it. I understand, and I sympathize with the people who bought stuff as an investment property and try to go on for that, but I would be better off if you would just let people choose how they're going to use your property and then zone them accordingly to it. I'm going to live there. I mean, that's my house. And, you know, having the front part of it being commercial and having to pay so much on it, I mean, it's ridiculous. My parents' house are, 44 acres, and they pay the same tax I do on 8.5. I mean, no one ever sees this side of it, I guess. Everyone sees the business end of it. But, you know, my house was built when the road was still 2 lanes. So, you know, just put that in consideration for all of that. You know, because I don't want to eventually be run out of my house because, you know, tax rates are going up and up and up, and I can't afford to keep what's basically, you know, the remembrance of my childhood and everything else. So, thank you.
Thank you for your perspective, sir. Anyone else? Going? Got to move fast than that, Mr. Royal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the board. My name is Robert Royal. I live in District 2 and I operate a business on Anderson Highway in District 3. I would like to say that, for the record, this RC zoning, I've always not approved of it. I felt like it was taking the property rights, it was taking them investments from the landowners for the years gaining. It was a bad decision to be made. A few moments ago, I heard the board call out a series of names to come back on December the 13th and meet in a public hearing and workshop with the board discussing this matter that we have before us. I think that's a wonderful thing. In a few minutes, y'all are probably going to vote on possibly postponing this decision tonight for 90 days. Again, I think that's the prudent thing to do, and I thank you for that consideration. One of the things, though, as I spoke about in the Planning Commission, was I had a plan when I came here 29 years ago in building my establishment on Route 60 and moving to this county. And the plan was a future goal or a vision. And so part of this whole workshop that I think for us to get to a reasonable resolution for the county to still move forward and to protect landowners' investments, and many of them, their lifelong investments for retirement they have tied up in this property, we need to hear where is the goal of Powhatan County? Where are we trying to accomplish long-term in changing these RC or split zoning parcels to a common zoning? I've heard, listening to the Planning Commission, it's been for 6 years with the comprehensive plan, has said, this is what the citizens want. Well, I agree with that statement, but is that all-inclusive? How many citizens have that vested interest in those pieces of parcel that you've got for years? I've recently learned, as Mr. Major has said, commercial properties, the RC has lost a lot of the authorized uses from RC to the new CC zoning and other citizens a couple months ago, which that was a fastball that went right past me. Again, I repeat, didn't have any notice of changing of uses. And yes, it is partly, y'all advertise, we should read the paper, we should pay more attention to our local government. So I don't sit here crying foul on that. That one got by me, but I caught this one. And I'm here tonight to speak. And I understand what you have to do is hard. I ask that you put together, I'm closing, put together some type of information package, if you would, for this work group that's going to work with the supervisors, and have the attorney at least come and make a presentation on what we can and cannot foresee to do as we discuss this matter, before we all scatter off at a shotgun blast on all different opinions and ways to go, and we end up spending a lot of time arguing of what's right and what's wrong. Give us some parameters. Give us some guidance. Give us the goals of what we're trying to accomplish for this county, but also for the citizens that are involved and the citizens at large who live in this county. Because no one wants to live in an industrial atmosphere. You know, so there's a balance we have to try to work with this committee. I thank you for your time. I look forward to working with each and every one of you.
See you on December 13th, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
James Adcock, 3001 Lower Hill Road, near Flat Rock. I was surprised when I first looked at these figures. It's 509 parcels, 1,291 acres. And then it looks to me that my brother, his wife, and myself own 1/3 of the land, of the total land. So it goes without saying that I am vehemently against the proposed downzoning. I think it's just a means of lowering the price of these properties so that developers in favor with the county can buy the land cheaper and then have it upzoned and leaving the property owners with a large financial loss. I think the proposed plan is arbitrary, capricious. It is certainly inequitable and unfair, and without a rational nexus or focus. If the nexus is supposed to be the controlling runaway growth, the people it impacts the most are the people who have showed no growth whatsoever. People own a lot of land, didn't do anything with it. It didn't contribute to your runaway growth one way at all, zero, not a none. The people who invested in Powhatan will be absolutely hammered financially by the county they invested in. I fully realize that we have big trouble right here near River City. We now have Sheets, which used to be our only skyscraper in Flat Rock, and now we have an undersized CVS with bad access roads. I think the board can handle this runaway growth without downzoning land that had nothing to do with the problem and would be destroying the equity all of the good citizens of Powhatan have long held in their land. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burris, I want to go on record thanking you for pulling a group together the other night to meet with me. That was very informative, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Carson, and that's the only reason I came to this podium, to congratulate all of you for taking careful consideration of this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I don't have prepared remarks, but I do have property on both sides of Route 60. And just recently was here when you all rezoned property on the eastbound side. So I want to go on the record saying that I am totally against.
Who are you?
My name is Natalie Meredith.
Thank you.
And I just want to make sure that I speak this time. I did not speak at the November 7th meeting, but I think it's important for you to hear from the citizens that, you know, the gentleman who spoke who is interested in down zoning, you know, that is to his benefit. So I think you need to take into consideration that each individual's property has really, you know, I paid to have my property rezoned. So are you going to pay me back for the money that I spent on that? So we need to have more discussions, and I would like to join your December 13th meeting if possible.
Let me repeat, the meeting on December the 13th is open to the public. Anybody can come. We're not allowed to have closed meetings like. Anyone else wish to address the board? Not seeing anyone come forward, I'll close the public hearing on this. I'm going to make a motion, and then we'll have a discussion. Mr. Timberlake, I'd like you to be at the December the 13th meeting too, if you will. Thank you. I move that we defer 0-218-38 for not more than 90 days. In the meantime, we will meet on December the 13th for the comprehensive plan work team. That's Mr. Melton, Mr. Williams, and Ms. Carmack, to meet in a public meeting with invitees, which I listed earlier, to discuss the work team's recommendations. And it is a public meeting, anyone can come.
Second.
Discussion? Then call for the vote, please.
I have some discussion.
Go ahead, Bill.
Please bear with me. This is not meant to attack anyone, but it's something that I have spent a fair amount of time on and put a lot of time and energy in over the years of my service on the Board of Supervisors and on the Planning Commission. I support Mr. Tucker's recommendation for the 90-day deferral and the committee appointment that he's proposing to bring forward. I asked myself why. Why did we need to deal with RC? There's a document that was given to the Planning Commission in spring of 2018. It says, problem, citizens have expressed concerns regarding the form and appearance of commercial development along US Route 60. I asked the question, how many citizens was sharing their concerns, or was this just something that had been blown out of proportion? Then staff says that we were not getting developers or landowners to develop any deeper than the 500 feet. I say the developers are not bad guys. We were told years ago, set the standards, match the future land use map plan, allow the development to happen. What has been done since then? There's a calendar that was in our packet, and I hope everyone picks this up. It has dates. It says on September 15th, And to Mr. Wool's comment, maybe people were a little asleep at the wheel because this didn't happen overnight. September 5th, 2017, Planning Commission discusses potential changes to the list of permitted uses in the commercial transition-based district, which is basically RC, C, O, and Courthouse Service Center. December 5th, the Planning Commission discusses potential changes to the list of permitted uses, both conditional uses and permitted uses in the transition-based. 16th, they passed it. So they worked on it September, October, November, December, and passed it in January. February 26th, the Board Supervisor directed the Planning Commission to conduct a study on RC with an eye towards a possible elimination and a fair decision on existing RC zoned land. May 6th, the Planning Commission discussed potential changes to RC zoning district. At its workshop on April 3rd, they discussed possible changes more. On April 23rd, the Board of Supervisors deferred any changes in the transition-based district. May 1st, at its workshop, the Planning Commission discussed amendments to the zoning ordinance to apply the same architectural standards developed to all commercial development. So for those of you who don't understand, they were proposing that all our architectural standards be the same in all districts, not just in VC or VR, but it was in RC, C, and O. Board of Supervisors continued the public hearing on the potential changes to permitted and conditional uses on May 21st. On June 5th, the Planning Commission holds a public hearing to amend the architectural standards to apply to all districts. June 25th, the board voted in a 5-0 vote to accept that recommendation and make all standards the same in all zoning districts. June 25th, the board holds its public hearing to approve the amendment to the same architectural standards. I apologize. And June 25th, the board appointed a comprehensive plan work group that Mr. Tucker has referenced to look at RC recommendations and also the comprehensive plan. August 7th, at its workshop of the regular meeting, the Planning Commission discussed possible changes to landscape standards. It's my understanding they worked, and there's some minor changes coming in that. August 27th, the board approved in a 3-2 vote the approved changes to the conditional uses and the permitted uses in transition-based districts, which is RC, C, O. So the board approved it on August the 27th in a 3-2 vote. I voted against it. What I did say in that meeting is this, to me, was piecemealed and it should be looked at in a holistic approach. September 4th, at the workshop after the regular meeting, the Planning Commission discussed review the draft of the County Development Guide, which describes different architectural styles prevalent in Powhatan County. October 2nd, the Planning Commission endorses the County Development Guide. What the County Development Guide is a tool that is used now to describe and paint the picture that you as developers or landowners could use to develop your property. There's also a review process that takes place after a rezoning, but before it gets to site plan, and the Planning Commission gets a pass at that. They actually will approve and work on the standards in that developmental meeting. It's basically like the old Architectural Review Committee. And the Planning Commission at its workshop on October 2nd discussed the possible elimination of RC zoning districts based upon a recommendation from the committee that Mr. Williams, Ms. Carmack, and I sat on. On November 7th, the PC voted on the elimination of RC in their meeting in a 3-1 vote. I say all that so that people will understand that this thing has been in the works for a while. It just wasn't done in overnight. I have to ask, why would we need to eliminate RC? We now have standards that are the same in all districts. If we don't like the standards, then improve the standards. We have a countywide developmental book online that you as developers can look at. We also have a developmental design pattern book submitted to the PC for review and approved prior to site plan submission. Staff and agencies, all agencies will do the site plan review before anything gets moved forward. Some people would say everyone has the opportunity to rezone property. I think several people spoke tonight why possibly people would not want to do rezoning. There's no trust. The trust is not there that if the parcel is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land use map, that they would go through a process and not be drugged through it. We had a rezoning recently. We encouraged an applicant to rezone recently, And they did. They went through the whole process. Unfortunately, they chose not to build on that parcel. They were looking at another parcel in the county, and the landowner told them they would have to go through rezoning based upon the reduction in uses in RC zoning. You know what that applicant said? Thank you, but no thank you. I've been through that nightmare once before. So I feel what we've done is all about control. Matter of fact, one of the planning commission members shared me, it was about control. What we've done, to me, is punitive and reactive. What I'm hoping we can come out of this, and I think we truly can, if we all roll our sleeves up and work hard, is to be proactive and create something that this county will be proud of, both supporting landowners and meeting the citizens' desires, needs. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mr. Tucker, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I was planning on addressing the issues that Mr. Melton talked about at the meeting that's coming up. There's been a lot of good comments. Mr. Royal made it one of the best, I thought, when he said, what's the goal? And have something out there to give us, why are you doing this? And we ought to be able to answer that question, and we will at that workshop. Now, I've also heard concerns about, are you going to give me my money back? I mean, because, you know, I paid X number of dollars, you know, for my rezoning. When we set forward with this process, Mr. Pompey was staff to the comp plan subcommittee that was formed. We had 4 meetings. Each meeting averaged at least an hour and a half. We brought in the Commissioner of Revenue. Mr. Pompey brought in reams of information, maps, because we knew we had a problem. It wasn't just because about appearances on Route 60. It was the reasons that were delineated in the public hearings by staff. Both Mr. Chardine and Mr. Pompey spoke with the planning commissioner's chairman about the need to address the way we were developing with small ununified development on Route 60. I'll come back to that. But let's get a few things out of the way tonight. Number one, if you've rezoned, you're good. You're sacrosanct. If you've developed already in your RC zoning, you're good. We have no intention of coming with a bulldozer and tearing down your business. That's not our intention. So you need to be aware of that, because I've heard a lot of misinformation about apprehension about we're going to take away what you've already rezoned to. If you've rezoned, you're good. And let me say again, if you developed within your RC, you're good. Now, what's not understood widely is downzoning to A10 and your commercial uses going forward. Okay? We're not expecting you to grow corn, you know, grow tobacco. A10 is the generic land designation that you'll see in most counties where it says this is where you start from. It's your future land use map that controls your commercial potential. If you look at what was proposed, you know, from the subcommittee, the commercial, the future land use map, you see that's commercial on Route 60. So if you're in an area where it calls for a commerce center, you've got RC, and let's go back to, you've had the property for 20 years, you've been paying taxes on the RC part of your property, but it's never developed. Why would you want to continue doing it? Why wouldn't you want to have the opportunity to pay a lesser amount of taxes based on A10, and then when the time came that you were ready to rezone, you could, and you'd be compensated. Now, we've talked about a variety of different ways where you could be compensated. You know, a free rezoning, or a rezoning amount that would cover the cost of advertising the meeting. But we want you to develop. We're not taking that away. We want you to develop. Now, go back to the gold here. Somebody mentioned CVS. I think Mr. Adcock did. If you look at what's gone on with RC development, it's been used as a tool for mischief in the county. That's where you see the problems where somebody would come in and they would do something by right within the first 500 feet, and then they come back in with the rest of the development for rezoning after the mischief has already been done by right.
Now, we've got two cases they're coming before one's before the Planning Commission, and another one will be coming after that, where exactly that happened, where it was done piecemeal as opposed to looking at the development as a unified whole. Go back to what Mr. Chardin and Mr. Pompey said at the meeting months ago. We're getting small, ununified, uncoordinated development. And they're spending all their time trying to make it work. And the reason you see on Route 60 things you don't like, if you don't like CVS and you don't like the entrances, then you can attribute it to the buy right development, because that's what's going on. So again, come to the meeting. We need to be sitting down with the table, as Mr. Burris, I thank him for bringing it to Mr. Tucker's attention, y'all's concerns, because there is a lot of misinformation. We don't want to harm you. Now, we do want control in terms of how the development is done. If you go to any other jurisdiction, you got zoning, subdivision ordinance that you're compelled to follow. We're not asking for anything other than to do what you do in other jurisdictions. The question about trust, if you're coming in and you want to know three things, or you want us to know three things, that you know the rules, and if you meet the rules, you'll be approved. And from one supervisor's point of view, I hardly endorse that. I want you to develop. That's why we've emphasized commercial development on Route 60. That's been for years in your comprehensive plan, the goal vein, where we've said everything is supposed to happen. So we want you to develop. What we don't want to do is to continue with the small, ununified, uncoordinated development where we've had the RC be used as the front end for the larger development that followed. That's it. So come to the meeting. Let's have that discussion. We want to make sure that, you're comfortable. We're not doing a taking. Again, if you've already rezoned, you're good. If you've already developed in the RC, district, the 500 feet, you're good. And if you're looking, for developing in the future, if you look at the future land use map where we've designated commercial from one end to the other pretty much, you're going to have the opportunity to rezone, at which time you determine that it's appropriate to go forward and not have the burden of continuing to pay a larger amount of taxes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any other comments about this item? There's a motion on the floor. Was it seconded?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt? The motion, as I understand it, is some period indeterminate, but less than 90 days.
Not more than 90 days.
Just for everybody's information, because no specific time has been selected, it will take another motion of the board to get it back onto an agenda. Because it isn't being moved to a specific date, no date has been selected. It will take board action at some point to select the date to get it back on the agenda, just so everybody understands.
Yeah, you got that?
The board would have an opportunity to set the date specific for when you want to take it from the table at its own meetings when you're together. So at either a workshop or a regular meeting, it looks to me like your closest to 90 days meeting would be your regular February meeting. That would be, I think, 89 days. So that's kind of what we're targeting. So you might have your February workshop would be where you direct that it come back to the agenda.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I'm just simply saying, if it just appears on an agenda at some point in the future, it could be challenged that no action was taken to get it onto an agenda. Because under Robert's rules, you have a motion to defer to a specific date. If you don't defer to a specific date, if you defer an indefinite period, then.
Tabled indefinitely, right, until it's affirmatively brought back.
Until somebody affirmatively brings it back.
Well, then plug into my motion, the meeting is closest to less than 90 days. Will that do it with a specific?
I need a new motion then, since you've already.
Come on, this is not this hard.
So
Let's do
moved,
this.
Mr. Chairman. Or second your motion.
So the motion is amended that it's deferred to the Board of Supervisors meeting that is the closest to the 90-day window, but prior to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second on this motion?
Second.
So may I have a roll call, please, on this motion?
Aye.
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 Aye. I'm calling a 5-minute recess. 5 minutes only, please. 5 minutes. David, that was great. That was great.
Good comments.
I called the Board of Supervisors meeting back to order, please. We are back in session, please. We're moving to item 12C, ordinance 0218-32, Apex Towers. Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning Director Andrew Pompey will present this case.
So this particular case is case number 18-06-CUP, which is a request by Apex Towers LLC for a conditional use permit to allow a telecommunications tower up to 195 feet in height on tax map 12-32. That particular property is located in northwestern Powhatan County at the intersection of State Route 630, Ballsville Road, and State Route 629, which is Trenham Road. The applicant is proposing a telecommunications tower up to 195 feet in height. The 2010 Long Range Comprehensive Plan designates this particular property as rural preservation on the countywide future land use map. Within your packet, on the last page of the staff report, there are 10 recommended conditions which address different issues, including tree protection, setbacks, and tower removal. The Planning Commission held several public hearings regarding this particular case. After holding a public hearing on November 7th, the Planning Commission recommended denial of this request with a vote of 3-2. One thing that I would like to note is after the agenda packet went out, the applicant worked with an adjacent property owner to amend the conceptual plan, which you all should have received today. What they're proposing that differs from what the Planning Commission considered is moving the tower slightly to the east from where it was originally proposed, so it meets the required setbacks set forth in the zoning ordinance from adjacent property lines. It would be closer than what is recommended in the zoning ordinance to an existing residential structure, but that resident of the structure has submitted a letter to you all, which you received via email, I think on Friday, and a hard copy you received tonight expressing support for the request. So the applicant does have a short presentation he would like to give, and if you would like to consider this proposed revised location, we'd have to amend some of the conditions that were presented in the staff report. But if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is here to give a short PowerPoint presentation.
Let's do that, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good to have you back, sir.
Members of the board. Thank you for hearing us this evening. I'm Dale Hill with Apex Towers. And I guess what I'd like to start with this evening is who are we and what do we do? Cell towers. We get a lot of frowns. Not something that we always want, not something that we always prey upon, something we would rather change. I guess it was summed up best in the last meeting when the chairperson said it's a cell tower, someone has to make a comment. But where we are is we are here because Powhatan County spoke. We don't drive up and down the road and say there's a field, we'll put a tower in it. We have a need which has been showed by a strategic need from RF Studies that on Ballsville Road there is a need for broadband, there's a deficit in wireless, there's a deficit in data, in voice, and even talking to your own emergency services community, there is a deficit which you have. We have, in response to that, made room for the county to be located on the tower. And although during these hearings, you can't answer every question that you'd like to because sometimes we've got to go back and talk to engineering. One of the Planning Commission members last week, or a few weeks ago, said he could support the tower if the county could locate in the top 20% of the tower. we're welcoming you to do that. After going back and working with engineering, we can allow you to be on that. Doesn't really take care of the need that Mr. Voorhees has, because I know he needed to be up at 400 feet, but it will be much better than being down to 115, 120. So we can put you in the top 20%. That being said, this is the propagation area of the tower. It'll stretch out for coverage for about 3 miles with a great penetration on a 1.5 mile area. It's very pinpoint to this location. The parcels which we're talking about are the two shaded in yellow. It's one parcel of land divided by Ballsville Road, and we'll be working on the southeastern parcel if approved. We went around town with different views to see where the tower would be visible from. 5 out of 6 areas it was visible. You can see by the red arrow to the left, right over top of the farm tractor, from Derwent Road from the northeast, we have a view of the tower. Corner of Derwent Road and Trenholm Road, a view of the tower. And again, this one on Trenholm is the most visible from the north. Duke Road from the east. Trenholm Road from the east. And then on Ballsville Road from the southwest, it was not visible due to the tree coverage. We're proposing a 195-foot tower with 4 commercial tenants. 1 tenant would be reserved as a 5-tenant tower. 1 would be reserved for the county's use. In talking about the tower and the site plan, the original plan, which is before you in the packet, showed an encroachment due to the setbacks on the Ballsville Road area on the county, and 1 to the south on the adjacent property owner, while adhering to the 504 feet setback from the nearest landowner. The reason that we didn't have a big issue and was trying to bring forth, we have presented you with a fall zone letter for this tower. This is a pictation of what would happen with a catastrophic failure of the tower and how the tower would fall. It would collapse within a 30-foot area inside the compound and not fall or scatter outside the compound. This is a design mechanism of the tower. Details of the project, as you can see, and the encroachment on the adjacent properties. After the last meeting, we contacted the landowner to the east, Dwight and Mandy Nichols, and I think you all should be privileged to an email from them. They have allowed the tower to be moved 50 feet, lessening the encroachment onto their, or increasing the encroachment on their property and lessening the setback, which was required by the county by 52 feet. I think this is probably an aesthetic setback and not one of concern. Most of those are when it comes to a residential structure. And in placing that, it would take the encroachments off the other 2 parcels and only make the encroachment on the Nichols property, which they're in agreement to. And this is a copy of the letter of support from Mr. and Mrs. Nichols. Any questions?
Questions, gentlemen? Ms. Cabell?
I do, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming again.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question. The tower itself, is it self-supporting standalone?
It
or
is self-supporting.
So there's no guy wires?
No,
Okay.
no guide wires.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You can sit
Thank
down.
you.
I'm going to open a public hearing on this issue. If you wish to address this issue in any way, please come forward. Give us your name. Hold your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Hi, Dominic Simonera, 5770 Moore Creek Road in Powhatan, of course. Regarding item C, the Apex Towers, I'm obviously in support of it. We have severely terrible cell service and computer service and everything in that part of the county. This is very, very much needed. We've been waiting years for good service. The county government itself is, you know, if you read the papers, I'm sure you guys do, you know we're looking to improve broadband and all kinds of communication for the county. So I think this is a step in the right direction. You can, in fact, a lot of the younger people these days, they know how to work their cell phone better than a computer at work. So you can get internet connectivity via your cell phone. So this is a very important, and I see it as a good thing. It's not a housing development, it's not a mall, it's not a factory, it's infrastructure, all right? It's like a telephone pole, so I wouldn't want to let the rural preservation zoning put the kibosh on this, basically. I would also say the impact to safety, which was also noted in the presentation that the county, lots of people, the emergency relief people, responders, they recognize this area of poor coverage. Not only does it benefit the people who live there, it benefits people who drive through, it benefits people who want to call in to people who live there, family members, business associates, et cetera. So I think with the safety aspect, I think it's wonderful. I can't wait for it to get put up and get running. And thank you very much for your service. I know you guys do a lot of work and take a lot of care. And also want to thank you. Several of the board members have responded to my written comments about this proposal. So I know you guys care. I know you read what people write to you, and thank you very much again.
Thank you,
And
sir.
I hope you approve this,
Thank you,
this
sir.
application.
Anyone else who wish to address the board? This is in my district.
Closing the public hearing?
I'm closing the public hearing. Does anyone else wish to address the board? Okay, the public hearing is closed. This is in my district. I'm going to move that we approve this based on 5 separate things. 1, their emergency usage of the tower, the LMR system. 2, the phone and data coverage improvement, broadband. The top 20% was a gimme. We appreciate that very much for you working with us for that. It really is helpful. And finally, we've moved it away from 2 neighbors' property lines with permission of the adjacent landowner, the Nichols. So I'm moving that we approve ordinance 0218-32 with the one change condition, which is what Mr. Pompey called our attention, which is the movement of the
Correct.
cell tower 50 feet.
So the movement of the tower would impact 2 particular conditions. Condition 6, we would just change the date to reference the plan that you have before you, which is November 13th, 2018. The staff report references a previous staff site plan. And then condition 7 will be rewritten to say, the setback for the telecommunications tower permitted by the CUP shall be a minimum of 234 feet from all property lines and rights of way, and a minimum of 450 feet from any residential dwelling existing at the date of approval of the CUP.
So my motion incorporates both of those changes.
I second the motion.
Any
Mr.
discussion?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the proper condition about being able, for the county to be able to locate in the top 20% of the tower, is that part of the motion that we're going to be voting on, that proper condition?
The intent is yes. So capture that, please, in the final document, Mr. Pompey. Got it? Got it?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any final discussion?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, the county makes no representation that we'll actually be able to use that, but we appreciate the applicant putting that forward as a proffer.
A recorded vote, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Norvik?
I was just, I'm generally in favor of this. I'm just making sure we're not setting any precedent or by moving the tower and working with setbacks and all that, would some future applicant point to this and say, well, you did it for them, how come you don't do it for me, kind of thing.
Mr.
So,
Latchin?
yeah, I was going to ask for county attorney's
It's
opinion.
discretionary. Our code has a code section that says that the discretion, and discretion is case by case. So nobody can use the fact that you exercise discretion on this case against you in a future case, because the facts will be different.
Case by case
Yeah,
makes sense to
It
me.
has to, by definition, be case by case.
Good
Okay.
question, though. We're always concerned about precedents. Any other comments?
Just, I am, as I said, I second the motion. I support the tower, and I appreciate the neighbor working with the applicant to be able to meet the needs. It is a severe need in that area. I have one son who currently lives in that area, and their cell service is very poor. They have poor internet, if any at all, and they try satellite, which constantly seems not to work. And then I guess my other son decided he thought it was so cool out there that he's decided to move out there too. So hopefully they can benefit in some shape, form, or fashion from this. So.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Norwood?
Aye.
Mrs. Cabell?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye. Moving on to item 12C.
12D.
I'm sorry, 12D, ordinance 0218-33. Mr. Voorhees?
Again, Mr. Chairman, our planning director, Andrew Pompey, will present this case.
Mr. Pompey?
So this ordinance amendment is case number 18-07-AZ, which is a request by Powhatan County to amend section 83-502 of the zoning ordinance to allow non-conforming structures to be expanded, subject to restrictions regarding the location and the size of that expansion. Currently, that section of the zoning ordinance generally prohibits non-conforming structures from being enlarged or structurally altered in a way that increases the extent of nonconformity. The Department of Community Development recommends approval of this request. Since it encourages reinvestment in existing structures while protecting the integrity of surrounding properties and maintaining adequate setbacks from adjacent roadways. On November 7th, 2018, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this request. After discussion and some amendments to the original proposal, the Planning Commission recommended approval with a vote of 5-0.
Any questions of staff?
Andrew, was this a result of the Riverton situation that triggered this, or was it another area that triggered this?
No, this particular zoning amendment, we've had a couple of older structures that the property owner was interested in expanding.
Okay.
And they weren't able to do so. And so it's a recurring problem, so we decided to address that. And some of our previous zoning ordinances allowed such a change.
Okay.
So basically, this allows minor modifications or expansion as long as it doesn't make the non-conforming situation worse.
That's correct.
Is that fair?
That's correct.
Thank you for those words. I'll now open the public hearing on this item, ordinance 0218-33. If you wish to address it, please step forward and give us your name. Mr. Sneed, good to see you.
Good evening, Andrew Sneed, 3710 Maidens Road. I stand in favor of this amendment, the zoning ordinance. I'm standing as a trustee of First Antioch Baptist Church, which is located at 3920 Maidens Road. The facility, the church that we have, that little church on the side of the road, 522, we have a mission. The mission is to be as inviting as possible. Well, currently, we don't have any ADA bathrooms. So with this, we can now upgrade our bathrooms, and therefore we can be inviting, again, Mr. Tucker, who is a consistent visitor and worshiper with us, you know, and again, we ask all of you all to come, but again, we appreciate your thoughtfulness, and again, I truly do appreciate the hard work you all are doing, and again, the night has been a great pleasure to watch our government work at hand. Now, again, I'm thanking you in advance for supporting us on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sneed. Anyone else wish to address this issue? I'll close the public hearing on this issue.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to make a motion, having been a property owner of a non-conforming building and the renovations that I did to try to keep it from getting out of conformity, I guess, if you wanted to call it, because it was a non-conforming. I fully support this ordinance 2018-33, so therefore I'm suggesting approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any final comments? Please poll us.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Norwood?
Aye.
Mrs. Cabell?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to item 12E, ordinance 0218-34. Mr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item and the next item are related to one another. Andrew Pompey, our planning director, will present.
So this particular ordinance is ordinance amendment, case number 18-08-AZ, which is a request by Riverton Associates LLC to amend section 83-476 of the zoning ordinance to remove standards that limit the size of multifamily residential structures within the Village Center Plan Development VCPD zoning district. Currently, the footprint of multifamily buildings within that zoning district is limited to 15,000 square feet, while the overall building size is limited to 45,000 square feet. This proposed amendment would eliminate those particular size restrictions within the VCPD zoning district. The Department of Community Development recommends approval of this request with the rationale listed in the staff report. On November 7th, 2018, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this request, and after discussion, the Planning Commission recommended approval with a vote of 5-0.
Questions of staff?
Mr. Tucker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Pompey, thank you for bringing this, and thank you for, I guess, the applicant proposing. As we worked on this area, I was one who felt that we're being restrictive with the size of the building, so I am full support of this. Thank you.
The applicant wish to speak? Okay. You don't have to. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is
Hold
my
a public
district.
hearing, first of all.
Oh, darn.
Sorry to delay you.
I open the
know
public
you're
hearing
ready.
on this item. I open the public hearing on this item. If you care to speak to it, please step forward.
It's okay.
My name is Jim LaPrel. I live at 2430 Founders Creek Court. And just to give you Founders Creek Court is going to be right behind this project. So the road I'm on goes right there. And in the back of this project are 2 apartment buildings. And we got this notice, thank you very much, because several of the people on our street didn't know this was going on. And I'm not here really to speak against the project. I have some concerns about how the project might go forward. The slope of the land behind the apartments go down into a creek, Roberts Branch Creek. It's a nice slope. And what we would ask is that the apartment buildings would be as far from the creek as possible, and that there would be no clear cutting behind the apartment back, because when you do that, there's going to be severe erosion into the creek, and sediment and silt are going to affect the creek. So we're concerned about those parts. But what I came to talk about is everybody on my street is either just moved in, moving in, or about to moving in. And most of them didn't know anything about this. My next door neighbor who just moved in said, "They're building apartments behind us?" Really? And without this notice, he wouldn't have known. So again, I'm not here to speak against it necessarily. I am concerned about a few things. But we would ask that you move these next 2 items to the next supervisors meeting so that my neighbors can talk and perhaps share their opinions.
Thank you, sir. Does the applicant wish to respond to the cutting and siltation and nearness?
I mean, there was an approved plan on that site for years.
Members of the board, my name is Casey Sowers. Our company, Riverton Associates, is the developer of the project that's, I guess, referenced here in this zoning amendment. It's part of the VCPD Planned Development District. And inclusive in that zoning actually was the rezoning of that Founders Creek Court property that the homes have been built on. It's just, that was a timing issue, but the Founders Creek extension was actually part of the same zoning as you all remember in 2016 that approved the apartments and the rest of the mixed-use development that we're planning on building down there the first of next year. With regards to the distance of development from the creek, those distances are typically set, at least minimally, by the state, by the DEQ, U.S. Corps of Engineers. They're hawks on making sure that you don't clear cut anywhere into the drainage channels of the important waterways. They're regulated, highly regulated. They'll take you to jail if you go and clear in an area that you're not supposed to be clearing. So I can assure you that from the perspective of clear cutting or cutting into the sensitive areas down there, or our lack, or preventing siltation, those are highly regulated construction activities that we would, of course, adhere to. Additionally, there's a floodplain of the James River that actually backs up to that section of Roberts Branch all the way to and past Winterfield Road. There's a 100-year floodplain there that provides even a further setback from those creeks. So even though we don't expect that to flood, it's a 100-year calculation. So there are certainly checks and balances to keep those buildings from getting any closer to the creek than is practical. And fortunately as well, it's about a 15-acre creek bed drainage area there between the Phase 2 of Winterfield Place development and Independence and the Founders Creek Court extension too. So there's a nice wide natural area there too. So I think that we can be counted on to do what's required and responsible from the environmental perspective. And I think also the way that we've designed the project is to really maximize the amount of privacy between the different residential uses. And I think that's what we designed around when we proposed the project to you back in 2015 and 16. So we'll continue to adhere to those same standards. What we've made application for in this request and I think the following request is to clear up some challenges that we had in the VCPD zoning district, because we're frankly the first development to follow through with a mixed-use project in the VCPD district. And so we're seeing, like my dad used to say, we're kind of crash test dummies. We're sort of finding the bugs in the ordinance and trying to work through them, with maintaining the intent of the development from the beginning. So.
All right, stay there for a second.
Yes,
Any
sir.
questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead.
Anyone else wish to address the board on this issue? Not seeing anyone come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Sowers, thank you for being a test dummy. Where'd you go? My pleasure. Yeah, your pleasure. Exactly right. Mr. Williams, this is in your district. I know you're very close to this. What would you rather us consider?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to motion for approval of ordinance 0-2018-37.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second the motion with comment. Again, as you read the packet, it talks, there are no encroaching and setbacks or
Yeah.
buffers will all be there. Excuse
I
me.
want to interrupt. We're on 34, Mr. Williams. You actually moved for approval of the next one.
So we have the ordinance amendment first that is related to building size. And
We're
then
on
we get
E.
into his proper amendment.
Page 157.
Okay.
Hold on a minute, Mr. Pompey. Mr. Williams, you want to amend your
I'll
motion?
amend the motion to ordinance 0-2018-34.
Thank
Now,
you.
Mr. Melton?
I'll be glad to second it with comment.
With comments. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Latchney.
Mr. Latchney, for catching that.
Thank
Again, as you read through the packet, there are no encroaching on anything else that hasn't already been agreed to in our previous rezoning cases through the Planning Commission and the board. Basically, it's just an expansion of a building square footage. So I am in support of Mr. Williams' motion, so.
And Mr. Melton, it's true, DEQ has never been accused of being easy to get along with.
No. And
Any other comments? Madam Clerk?
Aye.
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 Aye. Moving on to 12F. Ordinance 0-218-37. Mr. Pompey?
So this is the second part of Riverton Associates' request. Case number 18-08-REZC is a request by Riverton Associates LLC to amend the proffer statement for 4 parcels within the Winterfield Place 2 development, being tax map number 32-A, 32-B, 32-C, and 32-D. As part of this proposed proffer amendment, the applicant would like to amend the textual statement and conceptual plan governing site development. The applicant's proposing to add language referencing terrace-level units at the rear of select multifamily buildings. And he would add new language regarding a master parking plan, master signage plan, and permitted uses within that particular PD district. The subject properties are zoned Village Center Plan Development, VCPD, with proffered conditions, and those proffered conditions and the current conceptual plan were approved in January of 2016 with case number 15-03-REZC. So again, this is just a tweak to that original rezoning case that was approved. The 2010 comprehensive plan designates the subject properties as Village Center and Natural Conservation on the countywide future land use map, and the properties are located within the Route 711 Special Area Plan, which is one of our 3 growth areas in Powhatan County. The Department of Community Development recommends approval of this request. On November 7th, 2018, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this request. After discussion, they recommended approval with a vote of 5-0.
Questions of staff? Does the applicant wish to say anything?
Casey Sowers here with Riverton Associates. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have about this application, but I think this is the specifics of this request are all, in our opinion, enhancing the project. As an example, we've requested a master parking plan that allows us to park the multifamily units at 1 parking space per bedroom. The current county ordinance is 2 parking spaces per unit, and the reason behind that, typically multifamily projects, garden-style apartments in particular, are a combination of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And so most municipalities, particularly rural municipalities, will require a parking ratio of 2 spaces per unit, figuring that the 1 bedroom units and the 3 bedroom units kind of balance out. Well, this project, as you all know, has been an age-targeted project, and it's actually 50% 1 bedroom and 50% 2 bedroom. If we stuck to the parking requirement in the ordinance, we end up with 400 parking spaces, which is entirely too many. So we've asked for an actual reduction because it's reflective of the type of project that we want to build: shared parking, mixed use, smaller, more neighborhood feeling project. We've requested a specific set of allowable uses in the VCPD district because the way that the language in the ordinance is written, unless you specifically request those uses, even though they're outlined in the zoning ordinance, you have to ask for those uses to be able to allow those uses. So we've gone through and added the specific allowable uses into our zoning request to make them memorialized, so to speak. We've asked for a master signage package, which we'll submit to the Planning Commission, because that allows us to bring one signage package for buildings and for wayfinding to the Planning Commission to have it approved versus having to dodge kind of around the sign ordinance that's designed to cover for everything. This is more specific to our project, excuse me. And we've updated our conceptual plan with some input from VDOT and from county staff to make a better project. It's just it's simply got better flow, better access, just a sharper project than, and modestly changed, but sharper project than what we had in the original conceptual plan. The orientation of the buildings hasn't changed. The preservation of privacy and view sight lines and heights and things like that haven't changed at all either. So I think we've just made some amendments to improve the project. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions of the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll now open the public hearing on this particular item. If you wish to address it, please come forward and give us your name. Not seeing anyone come forward, I close the public hearing. Mr. Williams, again, in your district?
Motion to
Tuck, I
approve, Mr.
I
Chairman.
apologize, Mr. Williams. I do have one question to Mr. Sowers, please.
Yes, sir.
And I know the answer, but I just want it on record. Are you encroaching at all on Founder's Creek Court?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to motion for approval of ordinance 0-2018-37.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion with comment. Casey, please hurry.
Any other comments?
Aye.
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 Aye. Mr. Sowers, thank you very much for working with us and staff. We appreciate it. This is going to be one of those models that we can point at, I hope, of how to do these things. Very much appreciated.
We're hoping to get started March or April, for sure, so things are looking positive.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 12G, ordinance 0218-36. Mr. Voorhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be the last of our 6:30 PM time certain matters, and Allison will present for us.
Case number 18-09-CUP is a request by Thomas Malone to permit a car wash and auto detailing within the residential commercial RC zoning district. The proposed use will be located on tax map 41-12, adjacent to 2624 Anderson Highway in the Flat Rock area. The 2010 Long Range Comprehensive Plan designates the subject property as Village Center on the countywide future land use map. The property is also located within the Route 60 Corridor East Special Planning Area, which is one of the 3 designated growth areas in the comprehensive plan. The Department of Community Development recommends approval of this application because the proposed use is located within a growth area and is generally compatible with the surrounding properties. On November 7th, 2018, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this request. No members of the public spoke at that time. After discussion, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the application subject to the 7 conditions listed in the staff report. Most of the recommended conditions are all standard for CUP applications. Some additional conditions have been added to address signage and exterior colors. The applicant's representative, Chris Shust, is here tonight to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Mr. Shust, do you wish to make a presentation?
Mr. Tucker, members of the board, I appreciate you taking the time to hear this tonight. I don't have a presentation, but I do have one request for change to the conditions. Under items 6 and 7, there's a reference to bright colors being permitted or not permitted. Given the recent change to our standards, I'd like to request that that sentence be struck and replaced with just a requirement to be approved by the Planning Commission as part of the pattern book.
Okay, so you're asking for a modification of your conditions?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Any questions of Chris?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Chris, come on back. So is it your intention to use bright colors or primary colors that are currently not permitted with the accessory uses? Is that your intention to use bright colors?
No, our intention is just to be consistent with the recent changes with county standards and just to have that all evaluated at the time of the pattern book.
So you're looking to have it evaluated by the Planning Commission as being in compliance with their architectural standards, but making sure that that's going to be included as part of the review?
Oh, it absolutely will be, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Staff, y'all have any issues with that, Mr. Pompey?
I guess my one issue would be primarily with removing that language from condition 7 if the intent is to ensure that signage is more muted, because the Planning Commission doesn't review signage as part of the architectural standards. They just, signage is a separate part of the zoning ordinance.
Got you.
So
Chris, are you okay with just addressing number 6 instead of 7, 6 and 7?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with 6 and 7 because I think that we've got this review process in place, and it clearly will work. And I sat on the committee who worked through all of these standards and all the colors and all the conversation about companies that want to have their signage and their logos known and things. So I trust that the process we have in place will work. I understand Mr. Pompey's point on the colors, but I don't think this applicant has built a business in the county, and it's a fine-looking building, and I think he's not going to slap up something that looks bad. So I'm fine with 6 and 7 as the applicant said.
I will now open the public hearing on this matter. If you wish to address the board on this issue, please come forward, give us your name. Seeing no one step forward, I close the public hearing on this item. Mr. Williams, again, this is in your district. Please make your motion specific to what you want.
I will. I'm going to make a comment first. The reason we set up the review by the Planning Commission is because for whatever reason, it wasn't working. Things were still coming to the fore that we didn't feel were in keeping with the ordinance. So I don't think it hurts to have another set of eyes on things, particularly as it comes down to our goals. as we go back to the overarching goals that we've had on Route 60, is we wanted development, and if you want good development, you want good development standards. There's no such thing as good development if you don't have good access standards and good architectural standards. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with number 6, with the change that had been recommended by Chris, deferring that, letting the Planning Commission review that as part of their architectural standards. So I'm comfortable with that change, but I'm not going to move forward with including number 7 as was recommended or suggested by Chris just now before us.
So 6 is in and 7 is out?
That's correct. So I'm okay with letting the Planning Commission review the colors associated to the accessory equipment, deferring it till then, okay? And my motion would be approval with that change of ordinance 0-2018-36.
Is there a second to this motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
Would it be inappropriate for me to ask Mr. Schutz a question?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Schutz, I have a question.
Yes,
So
Mr.
I'm
Mel.
looking in our packet at the design of the building, and it references the earth tone brick, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and and are you doing a monumental style sign or pedestal style sign?
It's going to be a monument sign.
And so
That's
would the
what's
monumental
consistent.
sign be made of the earth tone brick?
Correct.
So again, I am not all about control. I think we need to trust. Could you share with us the total cost of the project?
I'll have to defer. Do you have an idea of the total cost right now? It's about $1.7 million.
1.7 million, we're gonna worry about the man that's gonna build a $1.7 million building and worry about his sign. I'm sorry, he runs a business in the county. I am not in support of not having 7 involved, so.
Well, let's go back. You know, the frame of the sign's in brick. What does the sign look like? You know, you've got the brick frame, but what is actually going to be within the frame?
Actually, that's the impetus for the request, is that part of the project hasn't actually been designed at this phase. So given that we do now have the pattern book standard, it felt appropriate to now go, if we get approved, to then go into full design, get the rest of that put together, and come back and have
Okay, here's what I'm willing to do. I'm going to tell staff right now, you know, when y'all approve this, okay, Planning Commission won't see the sign. But Mr. Melton says, okay, we've got these standards, and we're going to see if the standards work this time, okay? And I'm hoping everything's going to go swimmingly, but I'm just letting you know, if I see a sign go up that's got blinking lights of different colors, I'm not going to be happy, okay? Fair enough, guys? Andrew?
I guess I want the condition to say what you want me to enforce.
Okay, I want that condition, and Mr. Melton says we've got standards already in place. Do we? Do we have the sufficient standards in place to control the signage such that we're not going to wake up and see something on Route 60 that's got the blinking different colored lights? Okay? Is the ordinance satisfactory to address that?
Our current sign ordinance does not address the color of the sign. So this particular condition, if that's something that you want to address color and materials, this goes beyond what the ordinance requirement is. So if you do not want to address colors and materials, that condition would go. If you do, the language should reflect what you want me to enforce.
So it doesn't address colors or materials, so they could have any colors they wanted.
For signage, yes.
For the signage with inside, you know, but they really don't know what they want to do at this point, right, Chris?
So Mr. Pompey, I have a question, or maybe it's for Mr. Schutz. So the picture we see has Sudsies Car Wash in green lettering. Is that the sign, or is that?
That's a placeholder.
That's a
at this
placeholder,
point.
so we're not sure
Correct.
whether it's going to be green. And I think adjacent to the property is a bright orange building, is it not?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that was supposed to meet our standards, too.
That was done long before.
So, Mr.
Many
Williams,
moons ago.
is your motion still?
My motion is still 6. If y'all want to overrule me and include 7.
No, we got
please, by
a
all
motion
means,
on the
do it.
floor that 6 is in and 7 is out.
That's
Is
correct.
there a second to this motion?
Second,
Thank you,
I
sir.
think.
Any-
Andrew, that was a great answer. Are you running for office by any chance in 2019?
Any final comments?
Can I clarify what the motion is for the conditions?
See, I
so
told
know
you he's
what you were
running.
saying?
See?
Mr. Williams,
so-
try again.
So for condition 6, you would,
Will they be part of the review, of the architectural review by the planning commission, okay?
so the color of equipment associated with accessory uses such as vacuum cleaners and similar equipment shall be approved as part of the pattern book reviewed by the planning commission. That's what
Correct.
6 would read.
So that everything fits together, okay?
Okay.
You got what you need?
Yes, yes.
Any final comments? There's a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Mr. Lordvig? So will you, Madam Secretary, please?
Aye.
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 No.
Aye. We're moving now to item,
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment? I'm not voting no because I don't think it's a quality project and it meets all of the standards. I'm voting no because I think we're overstepping our boundaries. I do think that the gentleman's gone through the rezoning or conditional use permit, and now he's got to go in front of a committee to be approved further. And in that committee recently, they've told people they don't like their colors and they don't like their roof lines, and you can't use vinyl on Route 60, which is an approved standard. So again, I'm just, I think we are just going a little too far, but that's my comments. Thank you.
thank you. Moving on to item 9C. E, sorry. This is the ERA that we talked about earlier, or we had a public comment period on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to move to table this item for an indefinite period for 2 reasons. Number one, as I've said before, this is a momentous decision that we are faced with. This is not to be taken lightly. The most serious legislation there is changing the United States Constitution. This involves intensive study, thoughtful debate, expert legal advice from those who specialize in constitutional law. I know Ms. Weber is here tonight, and when she came earlier this month, in her comments, she said she is not a constitutional scholar and that this is not a county issue. Those are quotes. I fully agree that according to Article 5 of the United States Constitution, we have no business in this whatsoever. That's one reason that this is not in our purview. Another is that this resolution adds the pre-filed bill to our packet, and it's attached, therefore, to the resolution paperwork that we're looking at, and I'm referring to page 44 in our packet. If you look at the list of patrons, State Senator McClellan appears in the list of patrons along with many delegates, but State Senator Sturdivant does not, though he is listed on our resolution paperwork as a patron. We're being asked to vote on a bill that's not only not in our purview, it's not in its final form. That is done at the General Assembly, so we don't even have an updated version enough to show State Senator Sturdivant on here. So obviously, we have incomplete information. This is why it's done in Richmond and not in Powhatan, because we're about to vote to support or not support a bill that has not been finalized, and we have no idea what we're voting on to support or not support. In other words, we're doing kind of a Nancy Pelosi here where you have to vote on the bill to find out what's in it. We don't know what's in it yet. And the most stark proof of that is Senator Sturdivant doesn't even appear on the copy that we have. So again, I move to table this for an indefinite period until we can see a final version.
Is there a second to this motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to second it, but not for all the reasons that Larry just delineated. The reasons that I'm going to be seconding his motion is because it's not properly placed before us. I mean, we've known that for some time. And I'll be speaking more about that later. I'm a big believer in you go by the rules, because we are a country of rules and a country of laws. So when you bring back something that was discussed over a 10-year period, beginning in 1972, a time in my life when I was in graduate school, getting ready to start a career working as a rehabilitation counselor in Richmond Public Schools. I'd only been back from Vietnam approximately a year and a half, 2 years, I forget, but I remember back then all the discussion that surrounded this amendment. You couldn't turn on the TV, you couldn't pick up any of the current magazines back then without seeing a discussion of this. But we haven't had that discussion, particularly here in Powhatan County. My constituents, for the most part, they don't even know that we're addressing this, because it hasn't been in the news. There haven't been town hall meetings where Glenn Sturtevant or others, patrons of the bill, have come out and discussed why we need to do this. And I'm very reluctant, as Larry has pointed out, when you start addressing changes to the Constitution, that's about as serious of a thing you can do. So for me, somebody that's not a barrister, somebody that's certainly not a constitutional lawyer, the first thing I want to do is make sure that if I'm going to get behind something, that I know what I'm talking about. And I don't think we've had that discussion yet in this county, where we've had the type of discussion that we had during that time period from 1972, when that first 7-year period was expired, and then there was another 3-year period, and ratification failed. Now, if you look at the history of this in the courts, it is important that that time period was to be met. So you just can't declare something as unconstitutional. If you believe it's unconstitutional, then you take it back to the courts. Or if you believe you should bring it back, then the proper placement is in Congress. It's not with us here in Powhatan County. So I'm going to support the motion, but knowing that the motion will probably fail based on what happened at our workshop with our legislative agenda, I'm going to be talking more about why I'm not comfortable in moving this forward tonight.
Any other comments about this motion on the floor? Madam Secretary?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No. No. Is there another motion?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that we pass the resolution in support of ratification by Virginia of the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I want to make the statement tonight. The young lady who came to the podium to speak tonight, she's the bravest woman in this room. She's not here because her mom said she had bedtime. But I just wanted to recognize that young lady and be able to tell her, and I hope her mom shows her the video of this meeting, because what she did was truly courageous, because I can remember at her age, Mom, you could have never gotten me to the podium to even try. So you tell that young lady, you know, she's going to do great. You know, I had the same difficulties. In fact, I still have the same difficulties up on stage with my board members some nights, but she's going to do fine. So please share that with her.
Bravo.
Now,
Comment.
discussion on the motion.
Yes.
I'm just going to quote some of the things, that's been through the courts. This is Dillon's versus Gloss 256 U.S. 368, 373, that the Constitution contains no express provision on the subject of time limits for constitutional amendments is not in itself controlling. Examination of Article 5 discloses that it is intended to invest Congress with a wide range of power in proposing amendments. In Coleman versus Miller, the court said, we have held that the Congress, in proposing an amendment, may fix a reasonable time for ratification. And they quote Dillon versus Gloss again. There, we sustain the action of the Congress in providing in the proposed 18th Amendment that it should be inoperative unless ratified within 7 years. No limitation of time for ratification is provided in the instant case, either in the proposed amendment or in the resolution of submission. But petitioners contend that in the absence of a limitation by Congress, the court can and should decide what is a reasonable period within which ratification may be had. We are unable to agree with the contention. Our decision that the Congress has the power under Article 5 to fix a reasonable limit of time for ratification and proposing an amendment proceeds upon the assumption that the question of what is reasonable time lies within the congressional province. After Idaho sought to rescind its ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, the U.S. Supreme Court took a lawsuit questioning whether Idaho had the right to rescind its ratification, but by then the 7-year time limit had already expired. The Supreme Court held that the issue of Idaho's ratification or remission was moot. The Attorney General of Virginia in 1994 issued a formal opinion concerning the validity of the ERA in light of its expired time limit. Because the Equal Rights Amendment was not ratified within either of the original or extended time limit established by Congress for its ratification, it is no longer before the states for ratification, and any action by the General Assembly to ratify it now would be a nullity. Now, I said last meeting, the ratification process in this instance reminds me of one of my favorite athletes, Michael Jordan, who once said he never lost a game, he just ran out of time. Is that what we're talking about here? I believe it is. So, Mr. Chairman, I will not be supporting the
Thank you, Mr.
resolution as
Williams.
proposed.
Mr. Norvig?
Thank you. I do not wish to harm women through this ERA amendment. I have a wife and a daughter. They're sitting here tonight with us. I would never do anything to purposely harm them, nor deny them the chance to fulfill their potential. I do not wish to harm any woman, but that is exactly what I believe this ERA amendment does. Equality of opportunity and the fulfillment of personal potential whenever possible is a great thing. It is the right thing. But this ERA amendment is not about equality. It goes way beyond equality. It is about sameness of men and women. This is contrary to the laws of nature and to the health and safety of women for which this board is responsible. This amendment would force into the United States Constitution, our nation's most foundational and sacred document, the sameness of men and women. All laws would thus be impacted. Future legal decisions will lead to monstrous unintended consequences which do great harm to women, and that is why everyone here should be against it. I'll quickly go down a list of why I don't want to harm women, which would result from this amendment. I will not harm women by removing protective pregnancy workplace rules for women. I will not harm women by destroying heavy manual labor state laws protecting women. I will not harm women by denying certain Social Security benefits reserved only for women. I will not harm women by denying judges preference for mothers in parental custody rulings. I will not harm women by endangering alimony. I will not harm women by endangering child support. I will not harm women by removing protections from women absolved from a husband's debts in the case of desertion. I will not harm women by gutting numerous government-sponsored programs, such as the Women's, Infants, and Children nutritional program, the WIC. I will not harm women by removing stay-at-home mom, Social Security, and divorce-specific protections. I will not harm women by losing locker room privacy, resulting in spikes in voyeurism and possible assault. I will not harm women by exposing women to assault from men inside sex-integrated prisons. I will not harm women by creating integrated sports teams and the destruction of women's sports. I will not harm women by the elimination of women's colleges. I will not harm women by the elimination of the Girl Scouts, women's clubs, or any women's organization. I will not harm women by the impropriety of local government voting on an issue defined by Article 5, very specifically putting this in the charge of federal and state legislators, not local, were not even mentioned. I will not harm women by ignoring already existing Fifth Amendment protections for all. I will not harm women by ignoring already existing 14th Amendment protections for all, which has stood up in court. I will not harm women by riding roughshod over a Supreme Court decision that ruled this is a moot issue. I will not harm women by riding roughshod over Congress, who sets the rules for this amendment, not Powhatan Board of Supervisors. I will not harm women by riding roughshod over the 5 states that rescinded their ratification. They changed their mind after this amendment was first considered. I will not harm women by demanding equal pay, regardless of hours worked or lifestyle choices, resulting in their eventual unemployment. I will not harm women by by vastly increasing access to abortion, funded by you, the taxpayer, whether you agree with abortion or not. I will not harm women by forcing women into the draft in wartime in equal numbers of men. I will not force women into all frontline combat roles in equal numbers as men, thereby hurting them physically and hurting national security against ruthless enemies in time of war that don't give a rip about political correctness. I will not harm women by wasting this board's time on an issue that is not any of our 5 businesses. This shouldn't even be on the agenda. This is keeping us from handling county business, which might benefit women. Just to name a few things. Lest you think I'm exaggerating or haven't done my homework, you're wrong. I've picked out just a couple of the above points, and I'll give you some facts which already point to the future destruction the ERA amendment would bring to our lives. First of all, there's the money gap situation. I'm just going to briefly touch on that. I keep hearing about the 80% wage of women compared to men. You're telling the truth, but you're not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. There is a significant percentage of that 20% gap that is from lifestyle choices. In Wall Street Journal this week, the Wall Street Journal is not Breitbart News. We're not talking about a severe right-leaning publication here. It's very respectable, read by both sides of the aisle. The study that the Wall Street Journal talked about examined data from the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority because it is a union shop with uniform hourly wages in which men and women adhere to the same rules and enjoy the same exact benefits. Workers are promoted based on seniority, not performance. Male and female workers of the same seniority have the same options for scheduling, routes, vacation, and overtime. Under such rigid work rules, even a sexist boss or manager would have little ability to give men preferential treatment. Yet, even at the Transportation Authority, female train and bus operators earned less than men. Why? To explain why, Harvard economist Valentin Bolotnev, and I'm sorry I'm butchering that, and Natalia Emanuel looked at the time cards and scheduling from 2011 to 2017, a long period of time. Also factoring in sex, age, date of hire, tenure, and whether an employee was married or had dependents. They found that male train and bus operators worked about 83% more overtime hours than their female colleagues, and were twice as likely to accept an overtime shift on short notice. About twice as many women as men never took overtime. The agency pays time and a half for overtime, so these choices have a significant effect on earnings. Male bus and train operators also took 48% fewer unpaid hours off under the Family Medical Leave Act each year. Female employees were disproportionately willing to take less preferable routes if it meant working fewer nights, weekends, and holidays. One of the largest factors was childcare, as you can imagine. So stop it with the 20% gap. There is a gap. I'm not saying that people never abuse each other. I'm not saying that there aren't men out there who have discrimination against women. I am not saying that. But you must be honest with this wage gap issue. There are a lot of factors that result in women earning less than men. Let's get the whole story out there. I have just a couple more points, Mr. Chairman.
No, take your time.
The military. This is near and dear to my heart. In case you don't know me, I'm a United States Naval Academy graduate. Spent a total of 12 years as an officer and a naval aviator. Just like the citizen who I believe had to leave, I also am familiar with the way the service works in a way only people who have been in it can know. Women forced into the draft and into frontline combat. Under ERA, you must ignore sex differences. That's what it says in plain English. So this is inevitable. I worked with many women in the service. I still communicate with people that were in my squadron via Facebook. There are many roles that women can fulfill with value. But the ERA will open the door to lawsuits in which men will demand women do the same exact duties as men. It's about sameness, this ERA amendment. I speak here about the average capabilities of men and women. The left-leaning LA Times noted, this is a quote, "Obviously men and women are not the same. On average, an adult male produces 10 times more testosterone than an adult female, which almost doubles his muscle mass. The average woman possesses only 55 to 58% of the upper body strength of the average man. Testosterone also causes development of a heavier and stronger skeleton in males and has a specific effect on shaping the male pelvis, adding greater strength for load-bearing tasks and enabling more efficient locomotion. It increases the size and function of male hearts and lungs, and consequently males have 40% greater aerobic capacity and higher endurance compared with females. Women's smaller hearts require more blood to be pumped each minute at a given level of exertion because they have less hemoglobin in their blood to carry oxygen. These are the facts of nature. These differences will put women at a distinct disadvantage in newly opened infantry jobs, where they will be expected to carry 100-pound packs routinely. By the way, I'm still quoting the LA Times. Or in armor jobs, where they will have to load 35-pound rounds again and again. Women in these roles will have to constantly work at a higher percentage of their maximal capacity to achieve the same performance as men. No training system can close this gap. It's nature. I trained with the Marines. I did survival training in the Navy. I'm a personal witness that this is absolutely factual. A female Marine officer, now somewhat well known, wrote of her experiences in frontline infantry duty while serving a combat role. This is a person who was an NCAA collegiate star athlete, very much in shape, had no problem passing boot camp. Quote, this is her speaking. By the 5th month into the deployment, I had muscle atrophy in my thighs that was causing me constantly to trip and my legs to buckle with the slightest grade change. My agility during firefights and mobility on and off vehicles and perimeter walls was seriously hindering my response time and overall capability. It was evident that stress and muscular deterioration was affecting everyone, regardless of gender. However, the rate of my deterioration was noticeably faster than that of male Marines and further compounded by gender-specific medical conditions. At the end of the 7th-month deployment, I had lost 17 pounds and was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which personally resulted in infertility, but is not a genetic trend in my family, which was brought on by the chemical and physical changes endured during deployment. She concludes, for the long-term health of our female Marines, the Marine Corps, and U.S. national security, steer clear of the Marine infantry community when calling for more opportunities for females. Let's embrace our differences to further hone in on the Corps' success instead of dismantling who we are to achieve a political agenda, close quote. Last point. Another disaster brought on by this ERA amendment is the increased affordability and accessibility of abortion, which used to be counter to the Democratic platform. Before Roe v. Wade, ERA advocates in the early 70s were desperate to find a way to allow women to legally kill their unborn. Today's leaders have expressed the exact same goal. New Democratic chair of the House Judiciary Committee, New York Congressman Jerry Nadler, said they need the ERA to fully embed abortion in our Constitution. As I mentioned in a previous meeting, we know how this plays out. We have petri dishes for this. New Mexico and Connecticut both have state ERA amendments. Let's see how it turned out. In the case of Doe versus Mayer, the Connecticut Supreme Court held that since only women become pregnant, discrimination against pregnancy by not funding abortions is sex-oriented discrimination. The court concludes that the regulation that restricts the funding for abortions violates Connecticut's Equal Rights Amendment. In New Mexico, Right to Choose, NARAL et al. Versus Johnson, the New Mexico Supreme Court unanimously held that in light of its state version of the ERA, the state could not differentiate between abortions and medically necessary procedures sought by men, and ordered the state to pay for elective abortions under Medicaid. That is taxpayer money. No one wants to increase abortions, but that's what ERA does. A recent Gallup poll shows 71% of Americans are not in favor of abortion for any and every reason. But that's what this amendment will do. This hidden agenda is one of the basic driving forces behind the ERA. The most harm I can think of that can happen to a woman, and the most harm to her being able to realize her full potential, is to kill her before she's even born. I will not vote to harm women. Neither should any of you. That is why this board must vote no on this resolution. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Nordvig. Mr. Melton, anything to say?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Mr. Williams and Mr. Nordvig, thank you for your thoughts and your information you provided tonight. I'd like to thank all the citizens who've emailed me, called, or spoken to me on the ERA proposal on our agenda tonight. I've listened to and read all the different thoughts on this matter. I've researched and read information from different points of view to be better informed and prepared to vote on this resolution request. Matter of fact, I read an article in the Washington Post this weekend that I found very informative. The title of the article was, "After Midterms, Virginia Republicans Look for a Way Forward and Democrats Try to Build on Gains." The article was published on November 24th. The article had some interesting thoughts, and I enjoyed reading it. I will not share the entire article with you, but I will share one point of the article. The article mentions Jack Wilson, chairman of the Virginia State GOP, who says activists in more conservative parts of the state need to stop attacking suburban Republicans who break with party orthodoxy on issues from Medicaid expansion to taxes to the ERA. He further says, what I'm trying to communicate to the party activists is you can't be sitting in Southwest Virginia or Roanoke and go on social media ripping Glenn Sturdivant for what he's doing in his district. You have to allow elected officials in suburban areas the latitude to represent their areas. I would also like to add Powhatan County to that list of conservative counties. Some of you have chosen to attack Senator Sturdivant for sponsoring over this ERA bill. I say to Glenn, Powhatan citizens who attack you do not represent the 21,625 voters of Powhatan. Glenn, thank you for your courage in this matter. Some citizens have said to me, why not just push this down the road and not deal with it? For those of you who suggested that, they don't know me very well. I will not kick the can down the road on any issue. Over the years, we've adopted resolutions supporting many different topics. As a Board of Supervisor member, we all have the ability to not support a topic if we choose to do so. Some citizens says this resolution will divide our citizenry. To that I say it doesn't have to be that way. We can disagree on matters, but we do not have to attack or threaten each other because we disagree on a matter. To close, I want you to share you that my mom and dad raised me to treat all people the same and to never discriminate against anyone for any reason. I've also worked very hard to instill these same values in my 2 children and my grandchildren. Discrimination of any type against anyone is unacceptable. Discrimination in relationship to race, age, religious affiliation, cultural differences, and sex should never be tolerated. I agree with Glenn Sturdivant that the Equal Rights Amendment is a fundamentally American amendment. He further states that right now the U.S. Constitution does not prohibit discrimination on basis of sex. About half the state's constitution protect it, state and federal laws protect against it, but the problem is states' constitutions change and the laws change. The only way to ensure the protection is enshrined in the United States Constitution. To close, I am in full support of the ER resolution presented tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Cabell.
I made some very heartfelt comments at the legislative meeting last week. I'll just remind you of those. I will add that while I appreciate everybody's differing opinions, Mr. Nordvig, I must go on the record and say that I found your entire diatribe to be wholly offensive. Mr. Williams, I agree with you that the young lady that tried to speak earlier tonight is the bravest one in the room. But in her own words, to deny her anything less than a full and equal future is to do that wonderful young woman a tremendous disservice, and one that I will not be a party of. So I do plan to vote in support of this resolution tonight.
Mr. Nordvig has ably, I'll say it again, ably pointed out numerous potential unintended consequences of passing the ERA. I respect his concerns, and bringing them to our attention was the right thing to do. There is doubtlessly validity in such critical thinking, objectively done and with emotions modulated by probability analysis. My such analysis yields a comfort that many of the putative unintended consequences will not forthcome, and those that might forthcome are worth the price. For as many cases of negative unintended consequences that can be pointed out, an equal number of positive unintended consequences can also be identified. Number one, they said, if we don't exterminate the Huguenots, or at least disenfranchise and expropriate them, French civilization as we know it will crash and burn. The unintended positive consequences, a vibrant addition to America where they came, and to Powhatan, signees of the Declaration of Independence, men and women of arts and letters, ideas brought to the fore from French Enlightenment writers, artisans, and families which have added value to Virginia and America. Number 2, they said, if we loyalists don't fight with the Brits against the separatist so-called patriots, the colonies will go to hell in a handbasket, economically and culturally. We see where that ended up. Number 3, they said, if we teach the slaves to read, they will use their newfound skills to learn about the Enlightenment, about freedom, about self-growth, and human rights. The unintended positive consequences, the enfranchisement of these people, value-add citizens, and the realization of the promise of America, that all men are created equal. Number 4, they said, if we don't marginalize, dispossess, and eliminate the Jews from public discourse, they will continue to secure all the best jobs, corner the nation's wealth, pollute our blood, etc., etc., etc. 5, they said, if we don't outlaw liquor, etc., etc., etc. The concepts of unintended consequences and the probability analysis that we all do are valid tools in our decision-making. I do believe that this is about our citizens. Sometimes it's necessary after due consideration to vote and move on. We are big enough to tolerate differences of opinion, even if passionately held. Madam Clerk, will you poll the board?
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Moving on to item 7, our consent agenda. We skipped this earlier in the evening. Any motion here?
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to catch up from
Okay.
the missed consent agenda. Just a second.
We'll need a roll call, Mr. Chairman, because there's the resolutions included.
Thank you.
I'm okay.
Okay.
We don't have to have a roll call on the consent agenda, do we?
Yeah, because if it contains resolutions or ordinances, we do. Whenever there's resolutions or ordinances inside the consent, we do.
Gotcha. Okay, yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to item 10, old business bonded projects update. Mr. Voorhees?
I'm prepared to answer any questions. The only project that's still on there is the courthouse expansion, and that continues to have a bit of delay, but we're monitoring it daily and hoping that it will wrap up shortly.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one quick question on that project. So the contingency line, we've spent so much, and then we've got some pending contingencies there. We still have some monies left over. Are we okay with we're not going to come in over budget on that project, are we? We know not.
We're not anticipating that, though I would note the contractor is seeking some remuneration for the extension of their overhead and such, but we're denying those claims since it wasn't caused by anything we did. It's been caused by their own delays.
And I think, hopefully in there, we have a completion time, and they haven't
Correct.
met that, and if we
We
don't
have an
penalties-
equal claim, yes, sir.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Any other comments about bonded projects? Moving on to 10B, strategic priority scorecard. Ms. Voorhees?
I've got that for your entertainment and information. We do
I like
plan.
entertainment better.
Yeah, do plan to add some scorecarding with the approval of the OpenGov product that came with tonight's earlier action. And we also hope to have next month a mapping product that will show you the distribution of housing and its affordability in the county.
Any questions? Moving on to item 11A, the Audit Committee bylaws and charter.
I thought it was very good. I do have one question. It talks about that the members serve for one-year terms, but if I missed it, I apologize. Does it say when we reappoint them?
When you do it at your annual meeting?
January.
So we'll do it in January then, David? Is that what your thoughts
That's
are?
what I'm,
Makes sense.
but.
That was the
but
intent
hope-
of
I think
the
that was
audit
the
committee.
intent.
Okay, that's fine. I just,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, because you get the audit in November,
correct.
and then the audit committee kicks in probably, what, August?
Well, they meet
Following year, so-
they meet 4 times a year per the
Okay.
bylaws on a quarterly basis.
So, Charlotte, you see any problem with going ahead and doing it in January? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to our second public comment period. If you wish to address the board on any issue, please step forward and give us your name. Please abide by the same.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we actually voted on the audit committee bylaws and charter. Do we take a
Motion to
Vote
approve,
on
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. A second, please.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
So be it. This is our second public comment period. If you wish to address the board on any issue, please come forward and abide by the same rules that I said at the beginning, please. If you wish to address the board, come forward. Seeing no one come forward, I close the second comment period. County Attorney, do you have anything to say?
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
County Administrator, anything to say?
No comments.
Board members?
Good night.
Are we going in closed session?
No, sir.
No closed session. We are adjourned. Larry? Well done.